Greetings everyone, this is Marvel Harry. Prepare yourselves for Spider-Man found Harry in cupboard age 6 and spider powers fused with magic making him Omega Wizard. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The cupboard. The rain had been falling over Surrey for 3 hours by the time Peter Parker decided to stop ignoring his spider sense. He'd been cutting across the city at altitude, heading home after a long Tuesday that had involved a mugging in Flushing, a car fire on the BQE, and an extremely undignified chase across 3 rooftops after a guy who turned out to have stolen a sandwich. He was tired and wet, and the spider sense had been doing its low, persistent thing for the last 20 minutes, not the sharp electric crack it made when someone was about to throw a punch, but something underneath that, a steady hum, like a string held just past its natural tension. He tried to put it down to traffic, to something structural, a gas leak somewhere, a building putting out signals his body didn't know how to categorize. He'd been wrong about it before. He hadn't been wrong about it in a long time, though. He dropped altitude somewhere over Surrey and started quartering. The city thinned out below him into suburb, neat rows of houses, identical gardens, streetlights going orange in the wet. The kind of place where people had strong opinions about their neighbors' hedges. He moved in a grid, slow and methodical, the hum in his chest guiding him the way it always did, not with directions but with temperature colder when he moved wrong, warmer when he moved right. He landed on the corner of Magnolia Road and Privet Drive and stood still for a moment, rain coming off his shoulders, and listened. A television somewhere upstairs, a car on the next street over, whined through a gap in a fence. And underneath all of it, small and controlled and careful, the sound of a child crying. He crossed the road without hurrying. Number 4 Privet Drive, freshly painted black door, hanging basket that had been stripped of everything by the weather, a welcome mat that said welcome in a font that somehow managed to be unwelcoming. He stood on the front path and the sound was below him, coming from low down, near the ground, from the wooden slat door set into the space under the front steps. He crouched. The door had a bolt on it, on the outside. He pressed his ear to the wood. Crying was small and contained, the specific kind that children produce when they've learned that the larger version only makes things worse. He knew that sound the way he knew certain street corners, from having been close to it enough times that it had become geography. "Hey," he said. Normal volume, not a whisper. "I can hear you in there. Are you okay?" The sound stopped immediately. Silence. A small, very careful voice said, "Who's there? My name's Peter. I'm not going to hurt you." He kept his voice level. "Can you tell me your name?" A pause that lasted long enough that he thought the kid might not answer. Then, "Harry." Harry? He examined the bolt. Simple sliding mechanism. Heavy duty for what it was. Someone had replaced the original catch with something sturdier. He put 2 fingers on it and pressed, controlling the force so precisely it barely made a sound, and the door swung open. The smell hit him first, damp mildew, something closed and old beneath both. He had to fold himself nearly double to see inside, and when his eyes adjusted he stayed very still for a moment, because what was in front of him required a moment. The space was maybe 5 feet by 3. A child's mattress on the floor, not even a cot frame, just the mattress, with a pillow so flattened it was barely distinguishable from the ticking, and a blanket that had been washed down to translucency. A shelf above held broken toys, a headless soldier, some building blocks, a child's plastic car with 3 wheels. A single bare bulb, a hook on the back of the door with a small jacket on it, gray with washing. And in the corner, knees pulled to his chest, a boy. He was small the specific way that children get when they aren't being fed properly, a fineness to the wrists and throat that shouldn't have been there at 6. His hair was black and went in every direction with no apparent input from physics. His glasses were held together at the bridge with a wrap of sellotape, and they sat crooked on his face. Beneath his left eye there was a bruise, greenish-yellow at the edges, the kind that was a week old and had started as something darker. His eyes were green, remarkably green, the kind of color that seemed to be producing its own light in the dim space. He looked at Peter and didn't move. Peter pulled his mask off. He figured it was the right thing to do, show the kid an actual face, give him something to read. He pushed his wet hair back and just held the boy's gaze. "Harry," he said, "how long have you been in here tonight?" Harry considered the question as though it required checking. "Since before dinner," he said. "Uncle Vernon said I burned the bacon. Did you?" "It was already burned when he gave it to me." He said it without particular heat, just fact. "He said I did it on purpose." Peter looked at the bruise, then at the bolt on the door. Then back at Harry. "Has your uncle hit you before tonight?" Harry went very quiet. Not the quiet of someone who didn't know the answer, the quiet of someone calculating whether the answer was safe to give. "More than once," Peter said. The quiet continued, which was in its way an answer. "Okay," Peter sat down on the wet step half inside the overhang so Harry could see all of him. The rain pattered on the path behind him. Is anyone else in the house right now? Aunt Petunia and Dudley. He's my cousin. Harry's voice was measured, careful. He has the second bedroom for his toys. Where do you sleep, Harry? Harry looked at him like that was a question with a very obvious answer and said, here. Peter looked at the mattress, looked at the bolt. He said, okay, and stood up. I'm going to go knock on the door and talk to your uncle. I need you to stay here for a minute. Something changed in Harry's expression, a rapid series of calculations behind those green eyes. He'll be very angry, he said. Not a protest, not quite, more like a briefing. He was warning Peter. When things happen because of me, he gets very angry. I'm not worried about that, Peter said. Can you trust me for 5 minutes, just 5? Harry looked at him steadily, the look of a child who had learned not to trust people quickly, but who was, nonetheless, looking for a reason to. He examined Peter's face the way he might read a passage he didn't quite understand, carefully, going back over it. Then he nodded. Peter walked up the front path, rang the bell, and stood in the rain with his hands in his pockets. The television sound cut off upstairs, heavy footsteps that landed with the particular weight of a man who considered his weight an asset. The porch light snapped on, the door opened. Vernon Dursley was a large man in a way that seemed to be a personal position rather than just a physical fact. He had a mustache the color of old pennies and a face that went red easily and was currently most of the way there just from the walk downstairs. His eyes went to Peter's suit, the wet red and blue suit, the web shooters on his wrists, and his face did something complicated. Whatever he started. Your nephew, Peter said, pleasantly. There's a 6-year-old child locked in the cupboard under your stairs. He has a bruise on his face, and he's sleeping on a mattress about as thick as my hand. I'd like you to explain that to me. Vernon's face finished the journey to full red. Now you listen here, he said, and his voice had the specific bluster of a man who is used to being the loudest thing in any given room. That boy is not normal. He's a difficult, ungrateful, disruptive. We do our absolute best with him, which is far more than his kind deserve, and I will not stand on my own doorstep and be spoken to by some person in a costume. One more time, Peter said. His voice had not changed. It was still perfectly pleasant, the way still water is sometimes perfectly clear. The cupboard, the bruise, take your time. Get off my property, Vernon said and started to close the door. Peter put one hand flat against it. Vernon pushed. The door didn't move. He put his shoulder into it. He was a big man, and he clearly expected that to mean something, and the door still didn't move, because Peter's arm was connected to a body that could flip a car, and he was using approximately 1% of what he had available to him. Vernon looked at Peter's hand, then at Peter's face. The bluster didn't leave his eyes exactly, but something shifted behind it, the first real uncertainty, working its way in through the gap between what he expected and what was happening. I'm going to get Harry, Peter said, and I'm taking him with me tonight. Tomorrow, people are going to come to this house and ask questions, and you're going to answer all of them. That is not a threat, it is just what is going to happen. He held Vernon's gaze for a count of 3, then stepped back. You should probably call a solicitor. He walked back down the path. Behind him, he heard Vernon say Petunia, in a voice that was trying to be furious and getting overtaken by something that had more in common with panic. He heard quick steps on stairs, a woman's voice. He ignored all of it. Harry was sitting exactly where Peter had left him, shoebox in his lap. Where had that come from? Watching the door with an expression so carefully neutral, it must have cost him something to maintain it. Okay, Peter said, crouching down. Let's go. Harry blinked. Go where? Somewhere better than this, I promise. Harry looked at the shoebox for a moment. Peter looked at it too, old Nike box, lid slightly warped from humidity, held shut by a rubber band. Harry held it the way people hold things that are the only things they have. Is that everything you want to bring? Peter asked. Harry looked around the cupboard, took in the shelf of broken toys, the threadbare blanket, the bare bulb. He looked at it with the specific expression of someone doing an honest accounting of what the place had and hadn't been. Then he stood up, tucked the shoebox under his arm, and stepped out onto the path. Yes, he said. Vernon Dursley had come back to the front door by then, Petunia a pale shape behind him, and he opened his mouth. Go inside, Mr. Dursley, Peter said, without looking at him. He stepped between Vernon and Harry and kept walking to the gate. Behind them, Vernon started saying something about calling the police, about rights, about what people like Peter didn't understand about. Peter stopped listening. He heard Harry's footsteps on the wet path beside him, small and quick, keeping pace. He heard the gate click shut behind them. He felt the rain on his face. At the end of the street, he stopped and looked at Harry. Harry looked back. The streetlight was putting orange light across his glasses and making the taped bridge glow slightly, and he was dripping wet and carrying a shoebox, and he looked, even now, even standing in the rain outside the only home he'd known, not frightened, watchful, calculating. Like he was trying to work out what the rules of this new situation were. "Are you cold?" Peter asked. "A bit," Harry said. "Okay, we're going to Queens. My aunt lives there." He searched for the right shorthand. "She's the kind of person who has food ready at midnight. Do you live there too?" Yeah, he'd been sleeping on May's couch more nights than not lately, which was a separate problem for a separate time. Yeah, it's home. Harry absorbed this. His glasses had slipped, and he pushed them back up with one finger. "How are we getting there?" Peter looked at him, looked up at the nearest building, 5 stories, good solid brick facing. Looked back at Harry. "How do you feel about heights?" he said. Harry considered the question with great seriousness. "I don't know," he said. "I've never really been up high." "Well," Peter said, "there's only one way to find out." He crouched down. "Arms around my neck, hold the box tight." Harry climbed on his back with a natural, efficient athleticism that was a bit surprising in a 6-year-old and locked his arms around Peter's neck, not throttling, just firm, like he'd done it before. His shoebox pressed against Peter's shoulder. "Ready?" Peter said. "Yes," Harry said. Peter fired the web and they went up. He heard Harry's sharp intake of breath as the ground dropped away, the grab of wind as they swung out over the rooftop, and the street fell to a narrow orange ribbon below, and the city spread itself out in every direction. He angled into the arc and released and caught the next anchor point, and they were moving, really moving, the rain cutting sideways at this height, the city a geometry of light and dark. Harry made a sound. It started as something startled, nearly a scream, and then it transformed. Peter could actually feel the moment it changed, a shift in the arms around his neck from braced for impact to something else entirely, and it became a laugh. Not a polite laugh, not a careful one, a full, shocked, delighted, totally lost to itself laugh, the kind that comes up from somewhere deep without asking permission. Peter found himself grinning inside his mask. He gave them an extra arc, something with a little more swing to it, and Harry laughed again and said again, "Into the wind," and Peter did it again, and then they were over Queens, and the city was shifting under them from the manicured suburb of Surrey to the loud, alive, complicated density of home. He landed on the fire escape outside May's apartment building on the 3rd try. The first 2 attempts were sabotaged by Harry saying, "Wait, wait, go again," and Peter, against his better judgment, going again and knocked twice on the kitchen window. The light was on, the curtain moved. May Parker's face appeared, looked at Peter, dropped to look at Harry still riding Peter's back with his shoebox and his glasses and his wide green eyes, and the curtain disappeared and the window opened and she said, in the voice of a woman who was feeling several things and choosing which one to lead with, "Come in out of the rain." Harry climbed off Peter's back and stepped through the window into the kitchen and stopped. Peter watched him stop. Watched him stand in the doorway between the fire escape and the apartment and look at the room like someone who needed to be sure it was real before they walked all the way into it. The kitchen was small and warm and slightly chaotic in the way of kitchens where actual cooking happened, things drying on a rack, herbs on the windowsill, a list on the fridge held by a magnet shaped like the Statue of Liberty. There was a pot on the stove with the lid ajar and something that smelled like garlic and tomato getting itself together. There was also a large orange cat asleep on the chair by the window, which Harry noticed last, and which seemed to be the thing that made the room click into reality for him. "His name is Biscuit," May said. "He bites, but only if you deserve it." Harry looked at the cat. The cat opened one eye, assessed Harry, and closed it again. The verdict appeared to be non-threatening. "Sit down, sweetheart," May said, gesturing to the table. She was looking at Harry with the careful warmth of someone not wanting to be overwhelming, the specific social intelligence of a woman who had spent 30 years doing the maths of other people's comfort. Her eyes went to the bruise under his eye, and something in her jaw went briefly tight, then released. "What would you like to eat?" Harry looked at the table, then at May. Then, with the caution of a child who had learned the hard way that wanting things out loud made them harder to lose gracefully, he said, "Whatever's easiest." "That's not what I asked," May said, not unkindly. "What would you like?" Harry processed this. "Pasta," he said, as though suggesting something potentially unreasonable. "Pasta," May said, and went to the stove. Peter sat across from Harry, and Harry put his shoebox on the floor beside his chair and straightened his glasses and looked at the table and then up at Peter and said, quietly, "Is she always like this?" "Like what?" Harry gestured vaguely at the stove, at May, at the warm kitchen with its list on the fridge and its sleeping cat. "Like he searched for it, like it's fine, like everything's fine." "Yeah," Peter said, "she is." Harry looked like he was updating several things simultaneously. May put a bowl of pasta in front of him with a fork and a glass of water and sat down at the table without hovering, which was exactly the right thing to do. Harry ate. He ate the way Peter had known he would, slowly at first, carefully, putting the fork down between bites, like his body had to be convinced that the bowl wasn't going anywhere. Then, as that particular tension started to let go, with more focus, he finished the bowl and May took it without comment and came back with it refilled and set it down and went back to the counter. Harry stared at the second serving. Something moved through his expression that Peter couldn't quite name, not quite disbelief, not quite relief. Something in between, working its way towards something he might not have had a word for yet. He looked up at May's back. "Thank you," he said. May turned around and said, "You're welcome," and her voice was completely level, and her eyes were doing something that would have become crying if she'd let it. But May Parker had been a registered carer in another life, and she knew that the worst thing you could do when a neglected child said thank you for food was make it a bigger moment than it needed to be. So she turned back to the counter, and Harry ate his second bowl, and the cat woke up, stretched elaborately, and walked across the kitchen to sit beside Harry's chair with the mysterious decisiveness of cats choosing people. Harry put his hand down and the cat sniffed it and then pressed his head into it, and Harry's face did something that wasn't quite a smile, but was on its way there. When the bowl was empty, May said, "Do you like stories?" Harry looked at her. "Yes," he said carefully. "Good. I've got about 1,000. She stood and held her hand out. "There's a camp bed in the spare room that I imagine is a significant improvement on wherever you were tonight." "What do you say, bed, then one story, and then sleep?" Harry looked at her hand, looked at Peter. Peter nodded just once. Harry slid off the chair and picked up his shoebox from the floor. It went under his arm as naturally as breathing, the automatic motion of someone safeguarding the only things they had, and took May's hand. May led him down the hall. Peter heard her voice, low and unhurried, saying something about the spare room, and Harry's smaller voice asking something, and then May laughing, a real laugh, unguarded, the kind she saved for people she'd already decided about. And Peter sat down at the kitchen table and put both hands flat on the surface and looked at the grain of the wood. He stayed like that for a while. The cat jumped up onto the chair Harry had vacated and sat there looking at Peter with the self-satisfied expression of an animal that knew exactly what was happening. "Don't," Peter said. The cat blinked. Peter pulled out his phone and opened a notes app and started typing. He wrote for 15 minutes, detailed, specific, the documentation of someone who had learned that the legal world ran on paper, and that paper needed to be careful and exact. Names, address, physical observations. The bolt on the outside of the door, the dimensions of the mattress, the age and location of the bruise. He wrote without heat, clinical, because clinical was what would be useful. When he was done, he sat back and listened. From the spare room, May's voice had gone lower, into the register she used for stories, and there was no sound from Harry at all, which meant either he'd fallen asleep very fast or he was the kind of listener who went completely still. Peter suspected the latter. 15 minutes later, May came back down the hall. She poured herself a cup of tea, sat across from Peter, and they looked at each other for a moment in the particular silence of two people who have processed the same difficult thing separately and are now comparing notes without needing to say much. "Well," May said. "Yeah," Peter said. She curled her hands around her mug. She was looking at the hallway. "There are things about that boy," she said. "Things you should know, I figured." He leaned his elbows on the table. "His name is Harry Potter, May." Something moved in her face, confirmation of something she'd already suspected. "Yes," she said, "you know that name." "I knew his mother," she said. "Not well. She grew up near where I went to school." "Lily Evans?" She paused. She was different, Peter, in a specific way. There's a word for it that she used eventually when she was older, and it sounds like something from a fairy tale, and I know that must seem very... She stopped and started again. "You climb walls. You shoot webs from your wrists. Your blood heals minor wounds faster than anything any doctor has been able to explain. May. Magic is real," she said simply, "and Lily Evans had it. And if that boy in the spare room is Lily's son, and he is, I can see it in his face, then he has it too. And from what I understand about the world those people live in, he is not unknown to them. He is known very specifically." She set down her mug. "The question is why they left him in Surrey in a cupboard with a bolt on the door." Peter was quiet for a long time. The clock on the wall marked seconds. The city made its city sound 6 floors down. "Someone put him there," he said, "on purpose. Almost certainly. Someone in this magic world." "That would be my assumption." Peter's jaw moved. The calculating thing behind his eyes, the one that planned trajectories and mapped escape routes and worked out variables while the rest of him was busy with other things, got very busy very quickly. "He needs to know," he said, "about all of it, where he comes from, what he is." "Eventually," May agreed, "but not yet." "Not yet," Peter said. "He's 6, he stopped. He thought about Harry at the table, eating with that careful conservation, holding the shoebox like a lifeline. He needs to be 6 for a while, just be a kid, before any of the rest of it." May looked at him with the expression she wore when she was proud of him and was trying not to make it a whole thing. "Yes," she said. They sat in the kitchen while the city quieted outside and the cat settled on Peter's feet, and eventually from the spare room came the slow, steady rhythm of a child sleeping without fear, gradual, the way a river quiets after the rain stops, settling into something deep and even. Peter listened to it for a long time. In the morning, he woke on the couch to the smell of something cooking and the sound of a very serious conversation happening at low volume in the kitchen. He got up and stood in the doorway and found Harry sitting at the table with a book, the fat orange cat on his lap, apparently having made a permanent decision, and May at the stove, and the two of them were deep in a discussion about whether octopuses were smarter than dogs. Harry was wearing one of Peter's old NYU t-shirts as a sort of dress that came to his knees, and he had clearly slept very hard and not yet fully organized his hair, which had defeated gravity entirely, and he looked up at Peter when he appeared in the doorway and said with complete morning voice matter-of-factness, "Peter, did you know octopuses have 3 hearts?" "I did know that," Peter said. "2 of them stop when they swim," Harry said, like this was a personal affront. "That does seem like poor design," Peter agreed. "May says it's evolution." Harry looked at May with the expression of someone who accepted the point but remained philosophically troubled by it. They put pancakes on the table and they ate breakfast, and outside the Queen's morning was doing its usual loud, irreverent thing, and the cat developed an intense interest in Peter's pancake, and Harry ate 4 of them and drank a full glass of orange juice and read his octopus facts aloud, and at no point looked like someone waiting for the situation to go wrong. That came later, slowly, the checking. 3 days into staying at May's, Peter would catch Harry pausing in doorways sometimes, running a quick inventory of a room before entering it. The way he always knew where the exits were. The way he held things, books, his glass, the shoebox, with the hand slightly too tight grip of someone who had learned that things were removed without warning. These were not dramatic tics. They were small and quiet, and they were the specific residue of Privet Drive, and they faded slowly over weeks and months the way bruises fade. First the worst colors go, then the tenderness, then finally the memory of tenderness. The other thing took longer to address. 4 days in, Peter walked into the kitchen and stopped. Harry was sitting at the table reading, his Sea Adventure book open in front of him, and every crayon from the drawer was arranged on the table around the book in a perfect spectrum arc, red bleeding through orange into yellow into green into the blues and purples, evenly spaced, not a millimeter off. Harry was reading. He was not touching the crayons. He had not, as far as Peter could tell, touched the crayons at all. Peter stood in the doorway for a moment. "Harry," he said. Harry looked up. "Did you arrange those?" Peter said, nodding at the crayons. Harry looked at them. He looked at them the way you look at something you know is there, but have stopped actively seeing. "They do that," he said. There was a slight defensive edge in his voice, very slight, the residue of having had things called abnormal. I'm not doing it on purpose. Things just do that. When I'm thinking about something else." Peter sat down across from him. The crayons sat in their perfect arc between them. "How long has that been happening?" "Since always," Harry said. He was watching Peter's face now, reading it, calibrating. "At the Dursleys it happened more. Uncle Vernon," he stopped, restarted. "He said I was doing it deliberately to be unnatural." "He was wrong," Peter said. "I know," Harry said, not defensive, not seeking reassurance, just I know. The flat, certain knowledge of a child who had understood, on some fundamental level, that the problem was never him. Peter looked at the crayons, at the neat, impossible spectrum, sitting there on the kitchen table in morning light, the most quiet, extraordinary thing he'd seen in a while. "It's not abnormal," he said. "It's something specific. We don't know exactly what yet, but we're going to find out. And we're going to learn what you can do with it." He met Harry's eyes. "Not alone, together, okay?" Harry held his gaze for a long moment, those extraordinarily green eyes doing their reading. Then he looked at his book and turned a page and said, perfectly casually, "Okay." His shoulders dropped slightly, barely visible, the drop of something put down. The library was Harry's idea, offered tentatively 3 days after the crayons conversation, framed as a request he clearly expected to be redirected. Peter took him without discussion, and Harry walked in through the doors and stopped in the middle of the entrance and just looked at the tall stacks, the quiet, the particular quality of light that public libraries cultivate, the smell of paper and accumulated human attention. He stood there for a full 10 seconds, and Peter let him, and then Harry went in with certain steps, like a person arriving somewhere they have been homesick for without knowing it. He took out 3 books, the Illustrated Animal Encyclopedia, a chapter book about a boy who ran away to sea, and a serious book about human anatomy that the librarian handed over with a slightly raised eyebrow at the size of the reader. He read all morning in a chair by the window with his shoes off and the cat. They had left the cat at home, but Harry seemed to have retained its warmth as a kind of ambient presence. And he didn't say much, just read, and Peter sat across from him and did paperwork on his phone, and it was the most peaceful morning he could remember in recent history. On the way home, Harry said, without preamble, "My mum and dad died." "I know," Peter said. "I'm sorry." Aunt Petunia said it was a car crash. They were walking along a residential road, leaves beginning to go at the edges, autumn establishing its presence. Harry was looking at the ground in front of his feet, hands in the pocket of the too big jacket May had found for him. "I don't think that's true. What makes you think so? She looks different when she says it." He was quiet for a step or two, working it out. "When Aunt Petunia tells the truth about things, she looks bored, like she's doing something dull. But when she talks about my parents, she looks," he searched, "angry, like she's angry at them." "People don't usually get angry at people in car crashes." Peter looked at him sideways. "That's very sharp, Harry." "I just pay attention," Harry said. "Those are the same thing." Harry almost smiled. Not quite, the smile was still being mapped, still being tested for safety, but almost. Peter breathed in. "My uncle died," he said, "when I was 15. He was the closest thing I had to a dad." Ben, the name still had a specific weight when he said it. "Someone shot him, and I had the chance to stop the person who did it before it happened, and I didn't. I walked past." Harry was quiet. "I became Spider-Man after that," Peter said. Not as revenge. More like I had to do something with knowing what I knew. That not stopping something when you can stop it is its own kind of choice. Harry thought about this with the focused, serious attention he gave to things that interested him. "Does it work?" he said eventually. "Sometimes," Peter said. "Yeah, sometimes it works." They walked another half block. "Peter," Harry said. "Yeah." He stopped walking. They were under a tree, its remaining leaves doing their autumn business overhead, and Harry was looking at the ground, and his voice when it came was the smallest it had been since the first night in the cupboard. "Can I stay? I know it's May's flat and not yours properly, and I know it's complicated with the paperwork and I won't eat too much. I can help with, I know how to cook and how to clean, I can." "Harry," Peter stopped in front of him. "Look at me." Harry looked up. "You can stay," Peter said. "That's not something you need to earn. You don't have to make yourself useful enough, or small enough, or quiet enough. You can just be there, be a kid. That's it. That's all you have to do." Harry stared at him. He had the expression of someone hearing a sentence they knew the words of individually, but couldn't parse as a whole, like the meaning was there, but the circuitry for receiving it hadn't been fully installed yet. "Okay," he said, very quietly. They walked home. The tree's last leaves came down behind them. The legal work took 3 months. May's solicitor was a small, precise woman who seemed to regard Vernon Dursley's solicitor as a personal problem she was interested in solving, and she solved it with forms and documented evidence, and 2 formal visits from a child protection officer, and a phone call during which Peter could hear Vernon Dursley's voice through the receiver, generating specific and inventive objections. Peter's documentation, the notes from that first night, precise and clinical and detailed, was, the officer told May, some of the most thorough she'd received. A piece of paper arrived on a Wednesday. May brought it in from the letterbox and set it on the table in front of Harry at breakfast, and Harry read it twice with the serious care he gave to anything written down. Temporary guardianship, it said, May Ann Parker. Secondary, Peter Benjamin Parker. Harry set it down, sat still for a moment. Looked at the words. "Does this mean," he said, "that I can register for school?" "Yes," May said. "A real school." He said it like a concept he was examining for structural integrity, with other children and lessons and... That was generally the idea, May said, which was the driest she'd ever sounded about anything. Harry looked at the paper one more time. Then he looked up at May and said, "Thank you," and his voice was perfectly level and completely sincere, and it had behind it the weight of every morning he'd stood in a kitchen not his own, and every crayon arranged itself, and every book had been a door into somewhere better than where he was. May turned around and did something at the counter that required a moment. Peter looked at Harry, and Harry looked back with those green eyes that missed nothing, and gave a small nod, understanding, without needing it spelled out, what the turned back meant. That night after Harry had gone to bed, Peter sat on the roof of May's building with the city spread below him and the shoebox open in his hands. Harry had shown him the contents the week before, a specific and deliberate act of trust, offering the inventory of everything he'd considered worth keeping. The photograph. The soft, worn letter, the conker on its string, the crayon stub. The photograph was of a young woman with red hair, laughing at the camera, a baby held easily in the crook of her arm. She had a face that was warm and sharp at the same time and eyes that were, even in the slightly faded print, extraordinarily green. Peter put the photograph back, put the lid on, held the box on his knees. Above him, the city's light pollution muted the stars to a handful of visible ones, the reliable ones that burned bright enough to cut through. Below, Queens got on with its usual complicated self. Somewhere in the building, Harry Potter was sleeping the deep sleep of the newly safe, and his hair was almost certainly defeating the pillow in interesting ways, and the cat had almost certainly made its way onto the bed despite all previous discussions. Peter thought about magic, which May had explained over 2 hours, and which still sat slightly sideways in his brain no matter how many times he walked around it. He thought about a locked cupboard and a bolt on the outside, and a child who said "I know" with such quiet certainty that it could make you ache. He thought about someone deciding, deliberately, to leave that child in that cupboard, and the specific cold thing in his chest when he thought it was not the cold of fear, but of resolution. Whatever was coming, the letters, the other world, the things May had only sketched the edges of, it was going to arrive eventually. Harry was going to grow into himself, and the humming underneath was going to get louder, and the world that had once known his name was going to remember it again. When it did, Peter thought, looking out at the city, it was going to find a boy who'd had 5 years to become himself first. 5 years of libraries and libraries, and the cat and May's cooking and learning that taking up space was allowed, and that wanting things was not a liability. 5 years of being, for the first time, just a kid. Whatever came for him after that was going to have to go through Peter first. He meant that without drama, without performance, the way you mean facts. He put the shoebox under his arm and went back inside. Chapter 2, the fusion 2 years pass the way good years do, quickly, and without you noticing how much is changing until you look back and the distance surprises you. Harry Potter at 8 years old was a different creature from the boy Peter had pulled out of a cupboard in the rain. Not unrecognizably different, the green eyes were the same, the seriousness was the same, the way he read with total physical stillness was the same, but the person behind those features had filled out in ways that had nothing to do with the fact that May fed him properly now. He stood differently. He took up his exact right amount of space. He laughed at things without checking first to see if it was allowed. He had also, over the course of those 2 years, gotten very strange, not strange in a troubling way. Strange in the way of someone whose relationship with the physical world operated by a slightly different set of rules than everyone else's. Objects moved when he was concentrating on something else. Lights responded to his moods, not dramatically, not in ways that anyone except Peter and May would have named as impossible, but a bulb that flickered when Harry was frustrated, a lamp that burned brighter when he was excited, a power cut that resolved itself when Harry walked into the room and seemed somehow irritated by the inconvenience. Crayons had been the beginning. Since then it had been small ongoing adjustments, a glass that stopped itself falling off the edge of the counter, a door that swung shut of its own accord when Harry wanted privacy, a flame on the stove that turned itself down when May forgot it. Harry had started keeping notes. He had a composition book, black cover, college-ruled, his name written on the front in his very particular handwriting, small and precise and slanting slightly right, and in it he recorded what happened when, and what he'd been feeling or thinking when it happened. He approached his own impossible nature the way he approached everything, systematically, with curiosity and no particular drama, like a scientist who finds themselves the most interesting available subject. Peter read the notes sometimes when Harry offered them, which Harry did regularly because he considered Peter a collaborator in the project. Tuesday, October 4th, one entry read, made the kitchen tap turn on when I was thinking about being thirsty. I was across the room, took about 3 seconds, felt like leaning forward but without moving. Note doesn't work when I'm trying to do it directly, works better when I sort of think around it. Another, I think it's connected to wanting things, not just wanting, needing, or caring a lot. The book I dropped on the stairs, I cared about not losing my page. It opened back to the right page when I picked it up. Maybe it's about what matters to me. Peter had read that one twice. School had been another variable. Harry attended the local primary school in Queens where he was, by any measurable standard, academically several years ahead and socially several years behind, not because he was awkward, but because he had missed so much of the ordinary childhood infrastructure of knowing how to just be around other people without purpose. He learned fast. By the end of the first year, he had 2 friends, a girl named Carmen who shared his dedication to reading, and a boy named Marcus who shared nothing with him intellectually, but made him laugh, which turned out to be equally important. He came home one afternoon in the middle of year 2 and said, conversationally, a boy in my class said I was a freak because my hair doesn't do normal things. May and Peter both started talking at once. Harry held up one hand, an 8-year-old producing the gesture of someone chairing a meeting, and said, I told him that normal is a statistical concept and not a moral one, and that he should think about what he actually means before using it as an insult. He put his bag down. Then the bell rang. Can I have a biscuit? May gave him 2 biscuits. Peter made a mental note to tell that story at every available opportunity for the rest of his life. The powers, that was the word Peter used now, privately, because magic still felt like a word he needed a running start for, continued to develop. By October of Harry's second year at school, they had moved well past the ambient rearranging of small objects into something more deliberate. Harry could, when he concentrated in the specific sideways way his notes described, move things across a room. Not heavily, a pencil, yes, a book with effort. Anything larger than that produced a headache that lasted the rest of the day. He could make light, not from electrical sources, from nothing, a faint, sourceless glow that appeared when he cupped his hands and thought about it in the right way, blue-white and clean and slightly warm. He did this for Peter one evening in the kitchen, sitting across the table, and Peter watched the light pool in Harry's 8-year-old hands and felt the specific cognitive vertigo of seeing something his brain hadn't been built to categorize. "Does it hurt?" he said. "No." Harry turned his hands, looking at the light from both sides. "It feels like stretching a muscle that doesn't have a name." He looked up at Peter. "Is it strange?" "Very," Peter said. "Also extremely cool." Harry smiled and the light went out and left the kitchen, looking slightly dimmer than before, the way rooms look after something bright has been in them. It was the following week that everything changed. Harry had been running a slight temperature since Monday. Not alarming, a degree or so above normal, the kind of thing that school called a parent about once and then forgot. May had kept him home on Tuesday to be safe, and by Wednesday he was reading in bed with the cat at his feet and declaring himself fully recovered, and Peter had gone to work. He was 3 days into a junior research position at a biotech lab in Midtown that had the dual virtue of being interesting and not asking too many questions about his schedule, feeling like the situation was comfortably in hand. May called him at 10:30. He heard it in her voice before she'd finished the first sentence. May Parker did not alarm easily. She had watched Peter walk out of the apartment in red and blue spandex every night for 4 years and sent him off with the same level of visible concern she gave to weather-appropriate dressing. When her voice did the thing it was doing now, very controlled, very precise, the surface tension of someone holding something difficult very carefully, it meant something had gone seriously wrong. "His temperature spiked," she said. "In the last hour. It's gone up very fast, Peter. I've called 911, but I think you should come." He was on the roof of his lab building, and then he was moving, and it took him 11 minutes to cover a distance that should have taken 30. The paramedics were already in the apartment when he got there. Harry was on the camp bed. He'd been moved to his room when it started getting serious, and he was unconscious. That was the first thing Peter clocked. Harry was unconscious. He'd never seen Harry unconscious. Even sleeping, the kid had a quality of alertness, a sense of presence. Now he was absent from himself in a way that produced something sharp and physical in Peter's chest. His temperature was 41.8. The paramedic who told Peter this said the words carefully, like they were unstable. One of them had a line in Harry's arm. May was in the hall, a cardigan pulled tight around her, watching the room with that careful, controlled face. Peter went to her. She looked at him and said quietly, "It's very high and it went up very fast and it isn't responding the way it should." She paused. "I think it's the other thing, Peter. I think whatever it is that lives in him, it's part of this." Peter looked through the door at Harry. The blue-white light that Harry made when he cupped his hands. He could see something like it now, almost, a quality in the air around the boy on the bed, a faint unsteadiness, like heat shimmer but colder. None of the paramedics appeared to notice it. "I'm going to the hospital with him," May said. "I know." "I'm coming." He pulled out his phone. He didn't have numbers for the people May had told him existed, the magical ones, the ones who'd known Harry's parents, and even if he had, he wasn't sure tonight was the night to open that door. Tonight was about keeping Harry alive. At the hospital, the fever kept climbing, 42.1, then 42.4. The doctors were not panicking the way television doctors panicked, but they had the focused, clipped efficiency of people who had moved past caution into intervention and were working through their options with controlled speed, cooling measures, fluids, tests. One doctor, young and thorough, came out and told them they were trying to identify the cause and that they'd know more shortly, and that Harry was being closely monitored. Peter sat in the corridor with his elbows on his knees and looked at the floor tiles and felt useless in a way that was specifically terrible. He could punch cars, he could stop a train, he had absolutely no mechanism for fighting a fever in a small boy. The uselessness sharpened into something worse around midnight, when the doctor came back and her efficiency had acquired a slight underlayer of something that wasn't quite fear, but was close to it. The fever was not responding to their interventions the way it should. Harry's blood work was, she paused at this, unusual. Not dangerous unusual, not in any way she could point to exactly, but the results kept running marginally outside all their reference ranges in ways that were consistent across every test, which suggested either a systemic issue or, she said carefully, an underlying condition that wasn't in their current picture. She asked if there was anything about Harry's medical history that she should know. May and Peter looked at each other. Peter started. He stopped. He thought about how to frame it. He thought about the crayons and the blue light and the composition notebook with its careful entries about leaning sideways at the universe. He has some differences, he said finally, in how he is. They're not pathological, they're just different. The doctor looked at him for a moment with the expression of a person who understood they weren't getting the full story and was choosing their battles. Is there anything that's helped him medically before? Any unusual responses to treatment? His own blood, May said. Peter looked at her. When he cut himself last year, May said, looking steadily at the doctor. Badly on the kitchen knife. It had healed much faster than it should have. The wound we saw at 10 o'clock was almost gone by morning. The doctor was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That's helpful, thank you," and went back in. Peter looked at May. His blood heals fast, he said, and so does mine. I know, May said. May. I'm not suggesting anything, she said very precisely. I'm only saying I know. He sat back. The corridor was doing its hospital corridor thing, occasional purposeful movement, the institutional hum of a building that never went fully quiet. He looked at his hands. His blood had anomalous healing properties. He'd known this since a year after the spider bite, when he'd noticed that cuts closed faster than they should, that the doctor at his last physical had looked at an old scar and said something about unusually minimal tissue damage. It was one of the quieter effects of whatever the radioactive spider had done to his biology. At 12:47, a monitor alarm went off in Harry's room. Peter was through the door before anyone said his name, and he saw three things in quick succession: Harry on the bed, the reading on the monitor, and the quality of the light in the room. Heat shimmer quality had gotten worse. It was more visible now, obviously visible, a distortion in the air around the bed like looking through water, and the monitors were making sounds they hadn't been making before, and the doctor was there calling his name to the nurses, and one of the nurses was pulling the crash cart, and Peter was beside the bed and Harry's face was wrong, too still, too gray at the edges, absent in a way that was worse than before. "Harry," he said. Pointless, the kid was unconscious, but he said it. The doctor said something and someone said something else, and the room had that terrible efficiency of people doing things they'd been trained to do in a situation they'd hoped not to be in. Peter looked at Harry's face. He thought about the cupboard. He thought about Can I Stay in the shoebox and I Know and 4 pancakes and the cat sleeping on his feet and 2 years of someone learning that safety was a permanent address and not a temporary condition. He thought about his own blood. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't even a decision exactly, not the kind you deliberate over. It was the specific, absolute clarity that sometimes cuts through noise. This is what I can do, and that's the end of the analysis. He found the young doctor at his elbow and said, quietly and directly, "My blood has anomalous healing properties. I've been tested. I heal much faster than I should, and when my blood's been introduced into minor wounds, it's accelerated their healing. I want to do a direct transfer, not a full transfusion, small volume, direct line. I know that's not procedure. I know the risks. I need you to consider it because what you're doing right now isn't working fast enough." The doctor stared at him. "I'm not asking you to pretend it's standard," Peter said. "I'm asking you to look at the situation and tell me if you have anything else." She looked at Harry, at the monitors, at the distortion in the air that Peter was fairly certain she could see now, the way you see things at the edge of vision when something's wrong enough, even when your brain hasn't named them. She looked back at Peter. 5 minutes, she said. "Small volume, and the moment anything goes sideways on your end, we stop." "Agreed," Peter said. He put a line in his arm and ran it. Peter sat on a chair beside the bed and watched his blood move through a tube and thought about probability and biology and the specific nature of the thing living in Harry's blood that was different from ordinary things, and hoped with a completeness he hadn't felt about anything in a long time. For 3 minutes, nothing changed. Then the monitors changed, not dramatically, not the cinematic drop-then surge of the movies. The fever reading moved, 42.4 to 42.2, then 42. The doctor was watching the screen, and her face was doing something she wasn't going to name out loud in the middle of the room. Then Harry made a sound, a small sound, just air, just a shift in breathing, but the kind that comes with consciousness behind it. Peter leaned forward. Harry's eyes moved under his closed lids. His fingers moved slightly on the blanket, the same small automatic motion he made when he was reading something and wanted to hold his page. "Hey," Peter said. "Hey, Harry." No response. But the monitors kept improving and the heat shimmer quality in the room was changing. It had been frantic, erratic, the visual equivalent of noise, and now it was slowing, calming. Like something that had been fighting was gradually remembering that it didn't need to. By 2 in the morning, the fever was 39.8, and the doctor had let Peter's line go and was standing at the foot of the bed making notes with the expression of someone composing a report they had absolutely no idea how to write. By 3, it was 38.5. May had come in when the alarm went off and was sitting in the chair on the other side of the bed with Harry's hand in hers, not saying anything, just present in the specific powerful way that May Parker was present when things were hard, like gravity, like a fixed point. Peter put his head back against the wall and closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, Harry was looking at him. Not with full clarity, his eyes had the soft, unfocused quality of fever's retreat, the gradual returning of a tide, but they were open and green and they were looking at Peter. "Hey," Peter said. "Hey," Harry said. His voice was rough, very quiet. He looked at the ceiling for a moment, then at the room, doing his inventory. "Hospital," he said. "Yeah, was it bad?" Peter considered the monitors at 38.5, and the 20 minutes after the alarm, and the quality of light in the room at 12:47. "A bit," he said. Harry looked at him. Harry's lie detection, always sharp, was apparently operational even post-crisis. "Peter." "It was pretty bad, yeah," Peter said. Harry absorbed this. "I remember," he stopped. He had an expression on his face that Peter hadn't seen before, the specific look of trying to describe something there wasn't language for. "I remember it being very loud," he said. "Inside, like all the humming went up at once and I couldn't," he frowned. "And then something settled, something came in and everything settled." He looked at the line still taped to the inside of his elbow. Then at the matching tape on Peter's arm. "Was that you?" Harry said. Peter held his gaze. "Yeah." Harry was quiet for a moment. "Thank you," he said. "Don't mention it," Peter said. "I mean it," Harry said. Not the reflexive thank you of manners, the other kind, waited, looked at. "I know you do," Peter said. "Try to sleep." Harry looked at the ceiling again. His eyes were going heavy. "Peter," he said, "still here." "The humming," Harry said. His voice was fading towards sleep. "It sounds different now. It sounds there's something new in it." His brow fuckered slightly, even as his eyes were closing. "Something that wasn't there before. We'll figure it out in the morning," Peter said. "Okay," Harry said and went to sleep. They were right, but it wasn't the morning that revealed it. It was 3 days later, at home, Harry in his room doing homework, Peter in the kitchen drinking coffee and reading a paper. He heard Harry stop moving. That specific stillness, not reading still, not thinking, still but something else, the kind of stillness that has surprise at the center of it. He put his coffee down. Harry appeared in the kitchen doorway. He was in his school jumper, pencil still in one hand, looking at his other hand with an expression that was methodical and wondering at the same time. "Peter," he said. "Yeah." Harry held out his left hand, palm up. He was looking at it with the sideways concentration from his notebook, the lean without moving. And then something happened on the back of his hand, a line of blue light, briefly, a centimeter long, that disappeared almost as fast as it appeared. "I've done that before," Harry said. "The light, but this time," he paused. "When I did it this time, I felt it from 2 directions. Like 2 voices doing the same note." Peter set his paper down and came to the kitchen doorway. "Say that again." "There are 2 things now," Harry said carefully. He was being very precise, very methodical, the way he was when he was writing in his notebook, checking each word before he committed to it. "There were before there was the humming, the one I've always had, and now there's something next to it. Not on top of it, next to it, and when they do something at the same time he tried again. It's like 2 people pushing the same door." Peter looked at the back of his hand where the blue light had been. "Can you do it again?" Harry held his palm up. He did the sideways concentration. The blue light came back, and this time it was brighter than Peter had ever seen it. Not the soft, sourceless glow of before, but something more concentrated, more defined. A sharp blue white that threw a small shadow on the table behind his hand. It lasted 5 full seconds before Harry let it go. He didn't have the headache face that came after he'd pushed too hard. He looked completely fine. "Hub," Peter said. "It's your thing, isn't it?" Harry said. Not a question, he was too sharp for that. "Whatever you gave me when I was in the hospital." It went into the humming. Peter sat down at the table and leaned his elbows on it and looked at Harry straight. He'd been deciding, since the hospital, when to have this conversation. It turned out the conversation had its own timeline. "I have a thing in my blood," Peter said. "From the spider. I told you about how Spider-Man happened, the lab visit, the bite. Whatever the spider put into me changed my biology. My blood heals faster, my senses are sharper, I can stick to walls. It's all connected, it's all from the same source. And when you gave me your blood," Harry said. "It went into whatever you already had," Peter said, "and they mixed." He paused. "I don't know what that means yet. Biologically, magically, I don't know what that is or what it's going to do. But what I know is that you're not hurt, you're not worse, and what you're describing sounds," he looked for the right word, Bigger, it sounds bigger. Harry looked at his hand again, turned it over, back. He was running his private accounting, checking figures. Good bigger or bad bigger, he said. I genuinely don't know, Peter said. What does it feel like to you? Harry was quiet for a long moment. He set the pencil down on the counter. He looked at his palm again, and the blue light came back, and this time he brought his other hand in beside it, and the light spread between them, linking them like a bridge, brighter still, and in it Peter could see something that he couldn't see when Harry was just doing it with one hand, a structure almost, a geometry. Like the light knew where it was going. Harry's face was perfectly calm. He wasn't straining. He wasn't working hard. He was doing this the way you breathe, with that quality of ease that belongs to something running on its proper fuel. It feels right, Harry said. It feels like it was waiting for the second part. He looked up at Peter. Like a key that had the right shape but needed more metal. Peter looked at the light between Harry's hands. He thought about May saying, "He's not just a kid, Peter. You'll see." He thought about a composition notebook full of careful observations. He thought about a 6-year-old who said, "I know about his own nature with the flat certainty of fact." "Okay," he said. "Then we learn it, all of it, from the beginning." "How?" "The way we learn everything else," Peter said, carefully with notes. Harry almost smiled, and the light between his hands flickered and went out. "I already have a notebook," he said. "I know you do," Peter said. They started the next weekend. Peter cleared a space in the building's basement, concrete floor, no windows, nothing breakable, and Harry stood in the middle of it in his school trainers with his notebook and a pencil behind his ear and looked around with the expression of someone who found this entirely reasonable. They worked systematically, the way Harry did everything, not pushing, not trying to produce results, just observing what was there. What it responded to, the existing humming and reaching. It had a wide, ambient quality, like a hand spread open rather than a fist. It reached for things, particularly things Harry cared about, and moved them with the grain of wanting rather than against it. This, they established, was one thing. The new thing, the part that had Peter's fingerprints, metabolically speaking, sitting inside it, was different. It was faster and more directed. Where the original power was like water finding its level, this was more like a current being switched on. It ran along specific channels, and when the two operated at the same time, the whole was genuinely more than the sum. Harry made notes. Peter watched and asked questions, and occasionally, when something happened that was clearly significant, swore under his breath in a way he was pretty sure Harry could hear, but was choosing not to address. Like the third session, when Harry held out his hand, and the light appeared and Peter threw a tennis ball at him without warning, not hard, not fast, just to see, and the ball stopped. Not midair exactly. It reached a point about 2 feet from Harry's hand and slowed as though it had passed through something with resistance, and then stopped, suspended, while Harry looked at it with an expression of mild interest. "Did you do that?" Peter said. "I think so," Harry said. "It felt like the thing I do when a glass is about to fall off a table, but faster." "Harry," Peter said carefully, "I didn't tell you I was going to throw that." Harry looked at the suspended ball, then at Peter. "Oh," he said. "So I did it before I knew I needed to." "Yeah," Peter said. Harry made a note. By the time Harry was due to go back to school after that week, they had a rough map. The original power was broad and ambient, magic in the purest sense, reality adjacent, responsive to feeling and intent. The element from Peter's biology had given it reflexes, given it speed, given it something that recognized threats at a cellular level before the brain had finished processing them and moved to address them. The two were now inseparable. They'd fused at whatever level these things fused at, the night of the hospital, and what existed now was not one or the other but something third. Peter didn't have a name for it yet. Harry's composition notebook was already half full by that point, and on the last page he'd written so far, the page he was on the evening before school resumed, he'd written one line under the day's date, circled it, and underlined it. Peter found it left open on the kitchen table, apparently on purpose. "It isn't two things anymore, it's one thing, and it's mine." Peter read it twice, put it down, went to make coffee. In the front room he could hear Harry explaining something about octopus hearts to May with the tone of a professor who has found a receptive audience and intends to use it, and May was making the specific sounds of someone who was pretending to already know about octopus hearts in order not to dim the lecture's enthusiasm. The cat was on the kitchen counter, which it was absolutely not supposed to be, looking at Peter with complete moral vacancy. "Don't," Peter said. The cat blinked. From the front room Harry said, without any pause in the octopus explanation, "Biscuits on the counter again, Peter." And the cat stepped off the counter and walked out of the kitchen with its tail in the air, and the lights did the small, warm, brightening thing they did when Harry was pleased about something. Peter stood in his kitchen with the composition notebook on the table and the coffee going and the cat's retreating tail visible through the doorway and Harry's voice explaining marine biology in the other room. and felt, not for the first time, not for the last, that whatever came next, whatever the world decided to do with Harry Potter, and what Harry Potter was and what he had inside him, it was going to have a real fight on its hands. The boy was 8 years old. He'd survived a cupboard and a fever that should have one and a fusion of two impossible things in his blood that had produced something that didn't have a category yet. He was also currently explaining that octopus blood is blue because it uses copper instead of iron, which May would later claim to have found equally impressive. Peter picked up his coffee. He smiled at nothing in particular. Outside, the Queen's afternoon went about its business, entirely unaware that the boy in the front room talking about cephalopods was quietly becoming something the world had not yet built words for. Something that started as a child in a cupboard, and a spider in a lab, and a rainy Tuesday in Surrey, and had taken 2 years of breakfasts and libraries and composition notebooks, and one terrifying night in a hospital room to arrive at whatever this was. Something that was, as Harry had written, circled, and underlined, entirely, irreversibly, permanently his. Chapter 3, The Letter and the World. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Harry was 11 now, and the apartment had reorganized itself around him the way apartments do around people who have lived in them long enough. His books on the third shelf because that was eye level for him. His trainers by the door in the specific diagonal that meant he'd kick them off mid-stride. His composition notebooks stacked on the kitchen counter in chronological order, 7 of them now, the earliest ones cover-worn soft at the corners. The cat had died the previous spring and May had cried about it once privately, and Harry had been quiet for 2 days and then announced they should get another one. And so there was now a small gray cat named Newton who sat on Harry's homework and batted at his pencil and was, by any objective measure, significantly less dignified than Biscuit had been. Harry at 11 was sharp-faced and lean, still on the smaller side for his age, still with the glasses and the scar and the hair that had never once in 5 years agreed to lie flat. He carried himself differently now, not with the careful smallness of the boy in the cupboard, not with the watchful economy of someone rationing the space they took up, but with a quality of ease that was particular to people who know what they are and have made their peace with it. He didn't swagger. He didn't perform. He just moved through rooms like he was supposed to be in them. The powers had grown the way he'd grown, steadily, proportionally, without drama. The composed notebook observations of the 8-year-old had by now accumulated into something closer to a working theory, refined through 3 years of careful practice in the basement, in the park on quiet mornings, on rooftops with Peter on weekends when the city was still half asleep. The original magic, the ambient, reaching, feeling-driven thing, was vast. Harry had never found an outer edge to it, only an inner limit that moved outward as he grew. The spider element gave it architecture, speed, direction, reflex, the ability to act before thinking in situations where thinking took too long. Together, they did things that Harry's composition notebooks described with the particular scientific detachment of someone who had learned to be careful about astonishment. Stopped a car, one entry read, matter-of-factly. Marcus ran into the road after a ball. Reflex response, didn't think. The car was going maybe 30 mph. It stopped. The driver looked very confused. Marcus got his ball. I told him to look both ways next time. Then in smaller writing underneath, the car left a skid mark even though the wheels didn't lock, so it wasn't friction that stopped it, something else. Need to think about this. He thought about everything. That had always been true, and it was more true now. The systematic, relentless intellectual curiosity that had first appeared in a library at age 6 picking out a book about human anatomy. He read constantly, across subjects without apparent preference, and he retained everything he read, not with the mechanical accuracy of a recorder, but with the organic integration of a mind that could not encounter an idea without immediately asking what it connected to. Peter trained with him every Saturday, not in a structured, pedagogical way, more like two people with complementary skill sets working adjacent problems. Peter brought the physical discipline of 5 years of being Spider-Man, how to move, how to assess, how to not panic in situations that warranted panicking. Harry brought something Peter was still not entirely sure how to categorize, except that the results were consistently remarkable. The Saturday 3 weeks before the letter arrived, Harry had stood in the basement with his eyes closed and his hands at his sides and with no visible effort, no strain, no theater, levitated every loose object in the room simultaneously, held them there for 30 seconds, and set them all down without disturbing the arrangement. 11 objects. Different weights, different sizes, in perfect stillness. Peter had looked at the room, then at Harry. "How long could you hold that?" he said. Harry opened his eyes. "I didn't feel a limit," he said honestly. "I stopped because 30 seconds seemed like enough to confirm it worked." Peter nodded slowly. "Harry," he said. "Yeah, you're getting very big." Harry considered this. "I know," he said, not with pride, not with anxiety, just with the clean acknowledgement of someone who had been keeping accurate records. "I can feel it getting bigger, but it doesn't feel like," he reached for the right frame, "it doesn't feel like it's outrunning me. It feels like it's staying mine." "Good," Peter said. "That's the important thing. May had started gently over the previous year, filling in what she knew about the world Harry came from. Not in a single conversation. May was too smart for that, but in pieces, woven into ordinary evenings, the way you'd talk about a complicated piece of family history. She told him about Lily, about what Lily had been, about the school she'd attended, the world that existed alongside theirs, the things she'd heard secondhand over the years from a distance. She told him about his parents' deaths, the version she knew, which was incomplete, and Harry had listened to all of it with the same focused attention he gave everything, and had asked a small number of very precise questions, and had gone to his room afterward and been quiet for an evening. He came out the next morning and said, "So there are other people like me." "Yes," May said, "and they have a school. Several, apparently. There's one in Scotland." Harry processed this over his cereal. "Do you think they know about me?" May and Peter looked at each other across the table in the way they had developed over years of navigating this particular terrain, the rapid, wordless negotiation of what to say next. "I think," Peter said carefully, "that they know your name and they're probably planning to contact you." Harry looked at him. "You knew this was coming. We had a reasonable suspicion, yeah." Harry was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Were you going to tell me?" "We just did," Peter said. Harry held his gaze for a moment. Then he looked back at his cereal. "Fair enough," he said, which was the most Peter-like thing he'd ever said, and Peter had to work very hard not to let the pride show on his face. That was 3 weeks before the letter. The letter itself arrived on Tuesday morning in an envelope of heavy cream paper, addressed in emerald green ink to Mr. H. Potter, the front bedroom, apartment 6F, Queens, New York, which was both impressive in its specificity and mildly unsettling in its certainty, sealed with purple wax and a crest Harry looked at for a long moment before he opened it. He opened it at the kitchen table. May was at the counter with her coffee. Newton was on the chair across from Harry, presiding. Harry read the letter, then turned it over, then read it again. "Hogwarts," he said. "That's the one," May said. "It says I've been accepted." He looked at the second page, the supplies list. His eyes moved down it with the quick, scanning efficiency of someone reading for information rather than experience. He stopped at one wand. He stopped again at magical creature, one of owl, cat, or toad. He looked at Newton, who blinked slowly. "Can Newton come?" he asked. "Cats are on the list," May said. Newton, apparently satisfied, began washing his face. Harry set the letter down. He looked at it. He looked at May. "You're not upset," he said. "Why would I be upset?" "Because it's in Scotland," Harry said. "Because I'd be leaving." May put her coffee down and sat across from him and looked at him directly, which was how she handled the conversations that mattered. "Harry," she said, "this is where you come from, the other part of you, the part that was there before everything else. These are your people. And the school, I knew Lily Evans. I knew what she was, if it's even half of what she was. I know what I am already," Harry said, not defensively, just clarifying. "I know you do," May said. "But there are things about the world you come from that I can't teach you, and Peter can't teach you, and they can, and you should know all of it." She paused. "Besides, I've had 5 years. I'm not ready to let you go, but I'm ready for you to go, if that makes sense." Harry looked at her for a long moment. "It does," he said. He picked the letter up again. "Read the third line. It says a representative will arrive to explain procedures and assist with preparations." He looked at the date at the top of the letter. "That's this Friday." "I imagine so," May said. "Peter's going to want to be here," Harry said. "He already knows," May said. Harry looked at her. "You knew the letter was coming." "We had a reasonable suspicion," May said with perfect composure, and Harry looked at her and said fair enough again and went to make himself a second cup of tea with the specific controlled energy of someone who was very interested in the next development, but was not going to let it run ahead of him. Friday arrived with the precise punctuality that seemed, in hindsight, appropriate for a magical institution. At 11 in the morning, there was a knock at the apartment door, not the buzzer from downstairs, the actual door knock, which meant whoever it was had gotten into the building without being buzzed in, and when Peter opened it, there was a man filling most of the doorframe. He was enormous. Not the large fat man enormous of Vernon Dursley, but the large in every dimension enormous of someone who might have been sculpted by someone who had only heard humans described. He had a beard that contained enough material to upholster a sofa, and hands the size of dinner plates, and small, very bright beetle-black eyes that were doing rapid, flickering assessment work, even as his face was doing enormous welcoming warmth. He looked at Peter. "Rubius Hagrid," he said, "keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts, here for Harry Potter." "Peter Parker," Peter said. "He's in the kitchen, come in." He stepped back and Hagrid stepped in the apartment, which was a perfectly reasonable size for 3 people and a cat, became a noticeably smaller apartment. Newton appeared from the hallway, looked at Hagrid and retreated. Harry came out of the kitchen with his tea and looked at Hagrid with the open, assessing curiosity he gave to all new information. "Hello," he said. "You're from Hogwarts." Hagrid looked at him. Something moved across his vast face. Recognition. Something older than recognition. Something with feeling behind it. "Harry Potter," he said, and his voice had gone slightly rough at the edges. "Blimey." You've got Lily's eyes. He stopped himself, cleared his throat. Right, sorry, I'm from Hogwarts. Here to help you get sorted with supplies and that. Explain how everything works. Sit down, May said, appearing from the hallway. I'll put the kettle on, and before you start, we already know about the wizarding world. Harry knows what he is. We're up to speed on the basics. Hagrid blinked. Oh, he said. Well, he sat at the kitchen table, which creaked but held, and looked at Harry again with the same emotion working behind his eyes. Knew your mum and dad, he said. James and Lily, good people, great people. I was the one that I brought you to the Dursleys after. He stopped. Something uncomfortable moved through his expression. You put me in the cupboard, Harry said, not accusatory, factual. I left you with the Dursleys, Hagrid said, and he sounded like he was only now feeling the full weight of the distinction. Dumbledore's orders. He said it was the safest place, that the blood protection Lily left. He trailed off, looking at Harry's face. She left me with people who locked me in a cupboard, Harry said. He said it the way he wrote in his notebooks, clear, unvarnished, accurate. For 5 years, until Peter found me. Hagrid looked at Peter. Peter looked back. I didn't know, Hagrid said, and he sounded like a man who was realizing that not knowing had not been an excuse. I swear, awry if I'd known. I believe you, Harry said, and he did. You could hear it. He wasn't performing magnanimity. He was just accurate. I'm not angry at you, Hagrid. I'm telling you so you know the full picture. He picked up his tea. Now. Tell me about Hogwarts. Hagrid looked at him for a long moment, this small, sharp-faced, green-eyed 11-year-old sitting across from him with complete composure, telling him he wasn't angry the way you tell someone a mathematical fact, and seemed to make several rapid internal adjustments. Right, he said. Well. Best place in the world for a start. He talked for an hour. Harry asked questions that made Hagrid blink and then answer carefully, about the 4 houses, about the curriculum, about the political situation in the wizarding world which, Hagrid explained with a kind of relieved optimism, had been much improved since Voldemort's defeat 10 years ago. At the name Voldemort, Hagrid winced. Harry said the name back without wincing and Hagrid looked at him strangely. Don't you? Most people don't. It's a name, Harry said. Refusing to say it doesn't make the person less real. Hagrid said. Right, that's Peter, sitting at the counter with his coffee, met May's eyes. May looked like she was exercising considerable self-control. Diagon Alley, Hagrid explained, was where they'd get everything on the list. He could take Harry, he had a portkey, he explained, pulling something from his enormous coat pocket that looked like a burnt rubber ball that would take them direct. Peter looked at the rubber ball, looked at Hagrid, and said pleasantly but with absolute clarity, I'm coming too. Hagrid blinked. It's usually just, I'm coming too, Peter said. Hagrid looked at him, looked at the quality of stillness in Peter's posture, made a reasonable assessment. Right, he said. May as well, big day and all. They touched the portkey, Harry with scientific interest, Peter with the expression of a man buying travel insurance, and the apartment vanished. Sensation was exactly as unpleasant as Hagrid had implied it would be, and worse than that in practice. Peter landed on the cobblestones of the Leaky Cauldron's backyard with his teeth together, and his eyes adjusting to London Grey and Harry already upright beside him, looking around with the alert, curious expression of someone who had just arrived somewhere genuinely new and was running their first inventory. Harry said. Yeah, Peter agreed. Diagon Alley opened ahead of them through the archway and Harry walked into it and stopped, and Peter stopped beside him, and for a moment they just stood there in the entrance to a cobblestone street full of people in robes and windows full of impossible things, potion ingredients, brooms, telescopes, books whose titles changed when you looked at them from different angles, and the whole place hummed, actually hummed. With something that Peter felt on the level of the spider sense, and Harry clearly felt on about 6 levels simultaneously. It's like the humming, Harry said almost to himself, the ambient version. He looked at Peter. It's everywhere here, it's in the walls. Magic, Peter said. Everywhere, Harry said. He sounded delighted in the specifically restrained way of someone who considers open delight imprecise. This is what I feel like from the inside. From the outside it looks like this. They moved through the alley behind Hagrid, who navigated it with the ease of long familiarity and got recognized approximately every 30 seconds, each recognition producing a rapid exchange in which the other party would exclaim about Hagrid, then notice Harry, then do a very specific thing with their face, eyes dropping to the scar, a sharp intake of breath, a step back, an expression of complicated awe. Harry met every one of them with the same level, composed attention. He didn't flinch from the staring, he didn't puff up at it, he just looked back, gave his name when it was asked for, and moved on. The third time it happened, a witch in green robes who put her hands over her mouth and said, "It's Harry Potter," in a voice of genuine reverence. Peter leaned down and murmured, "You're doing great." "It's a bit much," Harry murmured back, which was the most honest thing anyone had said about it. Gringotts first. The bank was imposing in the way of things that wanted you to know they could crush you and were merely choosing not to. The goblins looked at Harry with the specific gaze of people, running a rapid and accurate assessment. Harry looked back without performance. His vault was deeper in the mountain than the standard ones. The cart ride down was genuinely alarming, and Harry held the bar and watched the darkness rushing past with an expression of pure enjoyment, which Peter was glad about because Peter was doing significantly less well with the cart and would have preferred Harry not notice. The vault door opened, gold light spilled out, a lot of gold light. Hagrid had described it as a nice little sum. It was not a nice little sum. It was a room of galleons stacked to mid-height, a room that spoke of old money and older magic, and Harry stood in the entrance of it and looked at it with the same quiet, measuring expression he used for everything. "My parents," he said. "Aye," Hagrid said quietly. James Potter's family had money going back centuries, and what they earned besides, they were good people. Awry. Harry looked at the gold for another moment. Then he took what he needed for the supplies list methodically and put it in the bag Hagrid provided and walked back to the cart. He didn't say anything for the ride back up. Peter let him not say anything. That was one of the things they'd established over 5 years, the difference between silence that needed filling and silence that needed leaving alone. This one was the second kind. They did the supplies list efficiently. Madame Malkin's for robes, Harry stood on the fitting stool, and the robes adjusted themselves, and he watched them do it with mild scientific interest. Books from Flourish and Blots, where Harry spent 20 minutes longer than necessary, because the books adjacent to his list were interesting, and May had told him he could get a few extra, and where Peter found himself genuinely fascinated by a volume called A Beginner's History of Animagi that he read for 10 minutes before remembering where he was. The cauldron, the scales, the telescope, these were efficiently acquired. Then they came to the wand shop. Ollivander's was narrow and quiet and smelled of wood shavings and something else, something older, and the man who appeared from between the shelves had eyes that were pale and very bright and looked at Harry the way a precise instrument looks at a measurement. "Mr. Potter," Ollivander said. "I wondered when I'd be seeing you." "Mr. Ollivander," Harry said, and his voice was perfectly polite and steady, and his eyes were doing the same thing they always did when he encountered something with depth, looking for the structure beneath the surface. "Your mother," Ollivander said, "had a willow wand, 10¼ inches swishy, excellent for charms, and your father mahogany, 11 inches, pliable, rather good for transfiguration." He moved between the shelves, pulling boxes. "But you'll be something different, I think." He turned to look at Harry with those pale, precise eyes. "You're already something different." Harry didn't ask how he knew that. He waited. Ollivander tried 7 wands. Harry tried each one, a small experimental wave, the wand doing nothing, then the gentle return and the reach for the next, with methodical patience. The 7th made all the boxes fall off the nearest shelf. Ollivander put them back with a wave of his own wand and said, "No," very firmly, and pulled another box. The 8th wand was holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches. Harry took it and did nothing with it for a moment, just held it, his head slightly tilted, the way he held things he was listening to. Then his other hand came up beside it, open, and the blue-white light appeared in his palm, and where the wand met the light something happened that made Ollivander go very still. The light spread from Harry's palm up the wand. The wand glowed from inside, a deep warm gold that was the opposite color of the cool blue and should have clashed and instead looked completely, precisely right, the visual equivalent of a chord resolving. Every loose wand in the shop stirred. The measuring tape on the counter unrolled itself slowly, like a cat stretching. Then Harry closed his hand and the light went out and the wand sat in his hand like it had been there always. Ollivander was staring. "It was all ready," he said, and then stopped. He tried again. "That wand had a pair. The other one, the wand that gave you that scar," he stopped again. He seemed to be recalibrating several things simultaneously. "He who must not be named," he said carefully. "His wand and yours share a core. The same phoenix provided the feather for both." "I know about Voldemort," Harry said. "You can say his name," Ollivander blinked. "Yes," he said faintly. Yes, quite. The point is," he looked at the wand in Harry's hand, at Harry's hand, at Harry. "The point is that your wand chose you, Mr. Potter, and something in you chose it back, which is that's rather more mutual than the usual process, because I have 2 things," Harry said. "And the wand connected to both." Ollivander looked at him for a long moment. "You're not what I expected," he said, and it came out like a genuine observation rather than a compliment. "What did you expect?" Harry asked. "Someone who needed more guidance," Ollivander said honestly. Harry considered this. "I might still need guidance," he said. "I just don't need to be afraid of what I am while I get it." He paid for the wand 7 galleons, which seemed like a very reasonable price for something that had just lit up every wand in the room, and walked out, and Peter followed him, and they stood on the cobblestones of Diagon Alley in the afternoon light, and Peter said, "Okay, feeling all right." "I'm great," Harry said. He was holding the wand loosely at his side, not self-consciously, not performatively, just carrying it the way you carry something that belongs to you. "I think I'm going to like it here. The alley." "All of it," Harry said. He looked down the street, at the people in robes, at the impossible shop windows, at the whole sideways adjacent world he'd been hearing about in pieces for 5 years, and his expression had the open quality it got when his full attention was in one place. "It's mine, isn't it? Part of where I'm from." "Yeah," Peter said, "it is." "Then I should know all of it," Harry said. "Not just the good parts, all of it." He went to get an owl, a small, fierce-looking tawny that chose him by landing on his shoulder and biting his finger, which Harry diagnosed as personality rather than aggression and named after no one because, he said, she clearly already had a name he hadn't been told yet, and they'd work it out. And then Hagrid took them for ice cream at Florian Fortescue's, and Harry ate 2 scoops of something that turned different colors as you ate it, and asked Hagrid about the political situation in the wizarding world with the systematic thoroughness of someone who had been given a new textbook and was working through the contents page. Hagrid told him about Voldemort and the First Wizarding War and Harry's parents and the night it ended, about the aftermath, the Death Eaters, the ones who'd recanted and the ones who'd been imprisoned, and the ones who'd claimed they were under the Imperious Curse, which Hagrid described with a level of personal skepticism that he attempted to conceal and did not fully manage. About Dumbledore and the Order of the Phoenix and the careful, ongoing project of rebuilding a world that had spent a decade being taken apart. Harry listened. He asked 2 questions, one about the killing curse and why his mother's sacrifice had stopped it, and one about what happened to Voldemort after that night. Hagrid answered both, and after the second one, Harry was quiet for a moment, eating his color-changing ice cream, and then said, "So nobody knows where he is." "Well, no," Hagrid said. "Might not even be some say he's gone, finished, but there are others as say he's not gone," Harry said, not dramatically, just accurately. Hagrid looked at him. "What makes ye say that?" Harry considered how to explain it. "Because if he was gone, my scar would feel different," he said. "It feels like something that's still in conversation with something else. Like a radio that's still tuned to a station." Hagrid stared. "I'm not scared of it," Harry said, preempting the concern. "I just think it's important to be accurate." Peter put his spoon down. He looked at Harry, who was looking at his ice cream, and he felt the specific thing he felt increasingly often when watching Harry: not fear, not worry, not even the protectiveness of the first night exactly, though all of those were still in there somewhere. Something cleaner. Something that was very close to the absolute confidence you feel when you've watched something become what it was always going to be. "Right," Hagrid said, and his voice was slightly unsteady. "Well, you're something else, or Rye, I'll say that. He's had good training," Peter said. Harry looked at him, one eyebrow, a very small smile. "You threw tennis balls at me," he said. "In a training context," Peter said. They went home in the late afternoon, portkey back to Queen's, arriving in the apartment in a way that seemed to disturb Newton on principle, even though the cat had not been in the room when they left. Harry put his owl in the cage May had gotten ready. The owl immediately set about investigating every inch of it with the focused assessment of a new employee evaluating the facilities, and sat at the kitchen table and laid everything out in front of him. Robes, books, cauldron, scales, wand. He picked up the wand and set it down, picked it up again. "Peter," he said. Peter was leaning on the counter. "Yeah, Dumbledore," Harry said. "He's the headmaster. He's the one who put me at the Dursleys." "Yeah, he had reasons," Harry said. "Probably good ones. The blood magic protection, what Hagrid said about Mum's sacrifice, I understand the theory. Makes structural sense, but," Peter said, "but he made a decision about me without knowing what was happening in that house," Harry said, "which means he was working with incomplete information. Which means," he set the wand down, "when I get there, when I meet him, he's going to have a picture of who I am that was built from what he expected, not from what I actually am. And I think I should be clear about the difference early." "Clear how?" Peter said. Harry looked at him steadily. "Just clearly," he said. "Not aggressively, not making a point of it, just not pretending." "Don't hide what you are," Peter said. "I'm not going to," Harry said, and it had the quality of his oldest statements, the flat, factual certainty of "I know" said at 6 in a cupboard in the rain. "I never did." Peter looked at him for a moment. Then he reached across and picked up the holly wand and turned it over in his fingers. It was warm slightly, and when he held it, he got the faint edge of the sensation he'd felt in Ollivander's. Not his own sensation, but an echo of it, a resonance. He handed it back. "You're ready," he said. Harry took the wand. He looked at it. He looked at the stack of books, the robes in their paper wrapping, the small fierce owl currently trying to unscrew the latch on her cage with her beak, which seemed like it was going to take her about 4 minutes to manage. "I know," he said. They ate dinner. May had made something elaborate to mark the occasion and declined to name what it was, which was a thing she did sometimes, and it was excellent. And after dinner, Peter and Harry sat on the fire escape in the autumn dark, and Harry asked questions about what Peter remembered from being new somewhere, and Peter answered honestly, which included the part about being scared, and Harry listened to that part with his usual focused attention. "Were you scared when you first became Spider-Man?" Harry asked. "Terrified," Peter said, "but you did it anyway. Didn't seem like there was a not doing it option," Peter said. Harry looked at the city. The Queen's evening was doing its thing, voices from other windows, a siren somewhere distant, the accumulated sound of a lot of people getting on with their lives. He'd grown up with that sound as a background, and Peter thought he probably didn't hear it consciously anymore, the way you stop hearing your own heartbeat. "I'm not scared," Harry said, "of Hogwarts, of whatever's there." He paused. "Is that wrong?" "No," Peter said, "it's not wrong. Harry reached for the right word. "I'm ready. I think I've been ready for a while and I didn't quite know what for. And now I know what for, and it just feels like." He turned the wand over in his hand, the golden blue light appearing briefly around it without apparent effort, without thought, the natural expression of a boy who had spent 5 years becoming himself. Like, now things are going to start happening properly. Peter looked at him, at the scar and the glasses and the small fierce owl visible through the kitchen window, now definitely getting the latch open, at the stack of books inside and the composition notebooks and the 5 years of breakfast in libraries and Saturday mornings in the basement. "Yeah," he said. "I think you're right about that." 2 weeks later, on the 1st of September, Peter took Harry to King's Cross. They went through the barrier between platforms 9 and 10, Harry first, no hesitation, stepping through the solid wall with the composure of someone stepping through a door, and the train was already there, red and steam-producing and magnificent in the slightly self-aware way of things that have been magnificent for a long time and know it. Harry looked at it with his open expression. The platform was full, families in various stages of the specific organized chaos of departure, owls in cages, toads on shoulders, a girl with very large and very bushy hair asking her parents whether they'd remembered the extra parchment, a boy with red hair who was very tall and trying to fit an extremely large trunk through a compartment door. Peter stood beside Harry and looked at the train and felt, not what he'd expected to feel, which was something in the vicinity of loss, but something else, something quieter. The specific feeling of a thing having arrived at the shape it was meant to have. "You'll write," he said. "Obviously," Harry said. "And call. Your mobile will work until you're at the school." "I know, Peter." "And if anything, I'll send the owl," Harry said. He turned and looked at Peter with those green eyes that were his mother's and belonged entirely to himself and said, "I've got it. I'm ready." "I know you are," Peter said. They looked at each other for a moment. 5 years of it, all the weight and texture of it. The cupboard and the library and the basement and the mornings and the cat and the notebooks and the hospital room and the tennis balls and the fire escape. All of it there in the space between them, needing none of it said. Harry put his hand out. Peter looked at it, then took it, and then Harry pulled him in and hugged him briefly, firmly, and stepped back. "Don't fight any aliens without me," Harry said. "Can't promise that," Peter said. Harry smiled fully, without checking, the way he'd been doing for 4 years now. He picked up his trunk, which moved a few inches to the left on its own before he'd fully gotten hold of it, and he walked toward the train. The bushy-haired girl from the platform appeared beside him at the door and said something. Peter couldn't hear what, and Harry looked at her and said something back, and she looked surprised, and then she looked interested, and Peter thought, there it is. That's the beginning of that. Harry found a compartment window and leaned out of it, and May, who had insisted on coming despite Peter's concern that it would make things harder, and had been completely right to insist, as she usually was, waved at him from the platform, and kept her face the way she kept it when things were both hard and right. The train started to move. Harry watched them from the window, and the platform moved past, and then the barrier, and then it was just the train and the tunnel, and Peter stood on the platform on the London side, with May and the other families dispersing around them, and the steam still hanging in the air where the train had been. May put her hand through his arm. "He's ready," she said. "I know," Peter said. "I know he is." They stood there a moment longer, the platform going quiet around them, the ordinary London morning carrying on above them through the ceiling, entirely unaware of what had just passed through it. And May said breakfast, and Peter said yes, and they walked back through the barrier into the world that didn't know it had just sent Harry Potter to school. And behind them, somewhere in the dark of the tunnel, accelerating north, the Hogwarts Express carried a boy with green eyes and a holly wand and 5 composition notebooks worth of himself toward everything that was going to happen next. Chapter 4, The Castle on the Hill. Hogwarts arrived the way truly large things arrive, gradually, and then all at once. Harry had spent the train ride doing 2 things simultaneously: reading a history of magic with the focused absorption he brought to any new text, and paying attention to the compartment. The bushy-haired girl from the platform had introduced herself as Hermione Granger within approximately 40 seconds of sitting down, which Harry had appreciated for its efficiency. She'd followed this immediately with the information that she'd read all the course books already, and had memorized most of them, delivered in a tone that was somewhere between declaration and challenge, the verbal equivalent of putting a flag in the ground. Harry had looked at her and said, "Which bit did you find most interesting?" Hermione had blinked. "What? In the books. What was the most interesting part? For me, it was the section on switching spells and transfiguration today. The implication that matter is essentially interchangeable at a magical level has some interesting overlaps with quantum mechanics." Hermione had stared at him for 3 full seconds, which was apparently her processing interval for unexpected input. Then she'd said, very carefully, "You've read the course books too, and some additional ones," Harry said. "I've had a while to prepare." Hermione's expression had done several things in quick succession before settling on something that looked like the cautious beginning of genuine interest. "I'm Hermione Granger," she said again, but differently this time, not as a flag, as an introduction. "Harry Potter," Harry said, another 3-second interval. "Oh," she said, then, "the quantum mechanics point is interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way." They'd talked for an hour. Hermione talked the way she seemed to do everything, with total commitment, a slight tendency to run over the natural end of sentences, and a quality of precision that Harry found genuinely enjoyable because it meant he didn't have to simplify anything. She was also, he noted, doing her own assessment of him, not the reverent staring of the people in Diagon Alley, but an active, intellectual kind, like she was measuring him against a model and finding the model required adjustment. He liked her enormously by the time Ron Weasley appeared in the compartment doorway asking if the rest of the seats were taken. Ron was tall for 11 and slightly gangly about it, with a smear of something on his nose and the specific kind of rumpled ease that came from growing up in a large family where self-consciousness was a luxury no one had time for. He looked at Hermione with polite wariness and at Harry with the expression of someone trying and failing to be casual, which Harry recognized and found endearing. "You can sit," Harry said. "I'm Harry." "Yeah, I know," Ron said, sitting down. "Ron Weasley, sorry. I know it's weird to say I know, it's just everyone knows, you know. It's a bit, you're kind of famous." "I've gathered," Harry said. "It's fine, tell me about your family." Hagrid mentioned the Weasleys. He seemed fond. Ron's face went from cautious to immediately, naturally open in about half a second, which told Harry everything he needed to know about Ron Weasley as a person. He talked about his family with the unself-conscious ease of someone who genuinely liked them, and Harry sat across from him and listened and thought that this was exactly the thing May had meant about knowing your own people when you found them. Hermione had told Harry about the 4 houses on the train, and he'd listened with the same attention he gave everything. He'd already read about them, but Hermione's framing was useful. She talked about what each house valued, and Harry had filed it as interesting structural information about an institution, and then moved on, because where he was sorted was, he'd decided, less important than what he did when he got there. He had not anticipated the hat being sentient. He'd anticipated something performative, a ceremony, a tradition, something that looked at external markers. When Professor McGonagall put the sorting hat on his head in the Great Hall and it started talking to him directly, inside his skull, he revised his expectations upward. "Well," the hat said, "here we are." "Here we are," Harry agreed, because there didn't seem to be a reason not to. "Interesting," the hat said, and he could feel it doing something that wasn't quite reading and wasn't quite listening, more like pressing against the surface of what he was, and finding the surface larger than anticipated. "I haven't felt anything quite like you in, well, a very long time, possibly ever. I've been told I'm unusual," Harry said. "Unusual." The hat seemed to find this an understatement worth acknowledging. "There are 2 things in here. No, 1 thing made of 2, and the 2 aren't fighting each other. They fused," Harry said. "When I was 8. Yes," the hat said. "I can see that. I can see all of it, actually." A pause. The cupboard, the fever, the boy in the red suit, the composition notebooks. Another pause longer. "Your extraordinary child. Not in the way of potential that needs developing. In the way of something that has already substantially developed and is now asking where to apply itself." Harry waited. "You could be in any house," the hat said, and it sounded like it meant this precisely. "Slytherin would take you for the ambition, though your ambition isn't self-serving in the usual way. Ravenclaw for the mind, unquestionably. Hufflepuff for the loyalty. You would die for the people you love and not consider it a sacrifice. A beat, but Gryffindor. Gryffindor is for people who choose the hard thing, not because it's required, because they'd rather." "That sounds right," Harry said. "Yes," the hat agreed, "I rather thought so." "Gryffindor," it called. Gryffindor table made a significant amount of noise. Harry took the hat off, handed it to McGonagall, and walked to the table with his usual quality of ease, and sat down between a pair of twins who immediately introduced themselves as Fred and George Weasley and said simultaneously, "Brilliant entrance," and Harry said, "I just walked." And they both laughed like he'd said something genuinely funny, which he suspected meant they were going to get along. Ron arrived at the table shortly after and sat across from Harry with the satisfied expression of someone whose instincts had been confirmed, and Hermione arrived after him and sat beside Harry and said immediately, "I got Gryffindor too," as though this was data Harry required. "I know," Harry said. "I watched." "Right," Hermione said. "Then, the hat took a while with you." "We had a conversation," Harry said. Hermione looked at him. "The hat doesn't it usually just—" "I know," Harry said. "It was unusual." He looked at the table, at the food that had appeared, and picked up his fork. "Can you pass the potatoes?" Hermione passed the potatoes with the expression of someone who had enrolled in a course and found the curriculum significantly more advanced than advertised and was trying to decide if this was a problem or an opportunity. She decided, apparently, on opportunity, because by the end of dinner she was deep in a conversation with Harry about whether the 4-house system created structural incentives for inter-house competition that might not be pedagogically optimal. which Ron was following with the expression of someone watching a tennis match played in a foreign language, but who was nonetheless genuinely entertained. Hogwarts itself was something Harry had no framework for, which was itself unusual. He had frameworks for most things. The castle was alive in a way that was not metaphorical. Portraits talked, staircases moved with apparent intention, the ceiling of the Great Hall showed actual sky, and the whole structure breathed with magic so old and saturated it had become architectural, the way old wood breathes with the trees it once was. Harry walked through it on the first morning and felt the ambient magic the way he'd felt it in Diagon Alley, everywhere, in the walls, in the stone, except here it was denser, more layered, centuries of it accumulated into something that had its own weather. He also felt, within the first hour of being in the castle, the separate thing, the quiet signal his scar had been producing since he was old enough to notice it, the radio-tuned station feeling he'd described to Hagrid. In the castle it was clearer, not louder exactly but more directional, like the signal had a source somewhere in the building. He noted this, added it to the current mental file, kept moving. Classes were interesting in the specific way of things that are foundational and know it. Transfiguration first, with Professor McGonagall, who was precise and demanding, and looked at Harry's homework with the expression of someone who'd been given more than they'd asked for, and was recalibrating the assignment's difficulty accordingly. Harry had turned the match into a needle on the first attempt without using the wand motion she'd demonstrated, which had produced a moment of silence from McGonagall that he'd taken as neutral and later understood was something else. Mr. Potter, she said when the class was working on their second attempts and she'd come to stand beside his desk. The match. Yes, Harry said. You didn't use the indicated wand movement. No, Harry said. I tried it first. It felt, he considered. It felt like the motion was a way of telling yourself to do it, rather than the mechanism of doing it. So I tried just doing it. McGonagall looked at him for a moment. Most students require the movements as focusing tools for some time before they can dispense with them. I have other focusing tools, Harry said. He wasn't being difficult, he was being accurate. I've been working on the underlying mechanism for a while. McGonagall put the needle down. I see, she said, in a tone that meant she was seeing several things simultaneously. And perhaps we should discuss extending your coursework. I'd like that, Harry said. Charms was Flitwick, who was small and enthusiastic and squeaked slightly when he called Harry's name on the register and toppled off his stack of books, which Harry had expected because Hermione had warned him about both the books and the squeak. The Wingardium Leviosa lesson Harry found genuinely interesting for its specificity. There was a right way to do this spell, a particular channel, and exploring that channel was like tracing the architecture of a new kind of thinking. He got the feather on the first attempt. Hermione got it on the third, which she dealt with through the medium of explaining to Ron exactly why his technique was incorrect, which Ron accepted with the good-natured fatalism of someone who had already decided she was right. And then there was potions. Snape arrived in a way that was clearly designed to be atmospheric, late enough that you'd been waiting, dramatic enough that the waiting had built to something. Black robes, black hair, a face that had been arranged into permanent disappointed expectation, the specific aura of a man who considered teaching an ongoing argument he was losing. He looked at the class with practiced contempt. Then he looked at Harry. Something moved in his face, rapid, gone quickly, but Harry had been reading faces since he was 6 and he caught it. Not the reverence of Diagon Alley, something more complicated. Recognition, but bitter. Potter, Snape said. He'd started going through the register, but he stopped at Harry's name like it was a destination he'd been heading for all along. Our new celebrity. He walked between the desks. Tell me, Potter, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Harry looked at him. He considered the question. He also considered the tone, the deliberate targeting, the performance of it, the room watching to see if he'd falter. Draught of living death, he said, one of the most powerful sleeping potions known. The preparation requires the asphodel to be powdered at a specific particle size, or the potency is compromised, too coarse, and the active compounds don't bind correctly. Snape's expression moved. Where would you look, he said, with slightly less performative contempt, if I told you to find a bezoar? A goat's stomach, Harry said, though modern sources suggest the bezoars of certain Persian wild goats are more potent than domestic ones. I'd check the specific source if potency was critical. The class was very quiet. Hermione, to Harry's left, had her hand halfway up and had frozen there. Snape looked at Harry with the expression of a man who had prepared a specific kind of test and found it wasn't the right test for this subject. He seemed to be rapidly revising something. What is the difference, he said, and now the performance was largely gone, replaced by something more genuine, something that was almost, despite everything, curious, between monkshood and wolfsbane. They're the same plant, Harry said, also called aconitum. The name varies by tradition. Monkshood is English common usage. Wolfsbane is older, more folkloric. The active toxin is aconitine. As a potion ingredient, it requires specific neutralization at the extraction stage, or you introduce the toxin directly into whatever you're brewing. He paused. Most of the significant variants of the antidote for common poisons use it. The toxicity is part of the mechanism, poison fighting poison. Snape looked at him for a long moment. 5 points to Gryffindor, he said, and it came out like it cost him something. He moved on. The class resumed breathing. Ron leaned over and mouthed something that Harry read as how, and Harry gave a small shrug that meant composition notebooks, and Ron appeared to find this explanation entirely insufficient, but was willing to accept it for now. Snape taught the actual lesson without targeting Harry again, though Harry could feel the man's attention returning to him at intervals, not the contemptuous performance of the beginning, but a more genuine observation, reassessing. Harry didn't mind being assessed. He was used to it. After potions, walking back up through the dungeons toward the Great Hall, Ron said, "That was mate, that was a bit." "Was it too much?" Harry said. He was genuinely asking. "No," Hermione said immediately. "It was exactly right. He was trying to embarrass you and you answered accurately. There's nothing wrong with that." "I wasn't trying to embarrass him back," Harry said. "I know," Hermione said. "That's what made it work." Ron looked between them. "You two are both going to be a lot, aren't you?" he said, but he was grinning and Harry thought, yes, there it is. That's exactly the beginning of that. The days built into the rhythm of a place. The castle had moods. Harry started to read them the way he read rooms, the way he read faces, the particular atmospheric quality of the corridors at different times of day. The moving staircases he found genuinely excellent. The portraits he found fascinating in a way that generated a long conversation with Hermione about whether magical imprinting created consciousness or merely simulated it, and what the ethical implications of either answer were. He also started noticing things. The third-floor corridor, right side door at the end. The sign said it was off-limits to students, which was fine, and Harry would have accepted that entirely except for the quality of the ambient magic around that door. It had the same old, dense, layered character as the rest of the castle, but underneath it was something more deliberate, the specific signature of something recently put in place. Something guarded and aware it was guarding. He filed it. He also filed the following: Quirrell's turban. The defense against the dark arts professor had the specific nervous energy of someone performing nervous energy on top of something else, which was a very different thing from actually being nervous. His turban he touched frequently in a way that looked like habit, but had underneath it the quality of concealment. Harry noticed this in the first defense lesson and said nothing, because noticing things and acting on them were two different verbs with different timelines. His spider sense, which operated mostly as a background awareness and rarely spiked hard in ordinary circumstances, did something around Quirrell that it didn't do around anyone else at the school. Not the acute alarm of immediate threat, something slower. Long, persistent hum of something wrong that wasn't wrong yet but was working on it. He noted it, kept it separate from his current concerns. Current concerns were potions homework, which was genuinely interesting and also more work than anything else, the flying lesson on Thursday, which Harry was looking forward to with the kind of calm anticipation he felt about things he expected to be good at, and the question of Hermione. Hermione had, by the end of the second week, slipped from being someone Harry found interesting into being someone Harry found necessary, which was a category he didn't apply often. She had an extraordinary mind, not the same shape as his, which was part of it, the way two instruments playing different parts of the same chord are more interesting than unison. She approached problems through logical structure and accumulated knowledge. He approached them through the intersection of logic and something more instinctive, the sideways lean. They disagreed regularly and productively, and neither of them had any patience for the version of disagreement that was about ego rather than accuracy. She also, Harry noticed, had a specific difficulty. She was excellent at being right and less excellent at being with people who minded that she was right. She had been right about Ron's wand technique in charms, and she had been accurate about it, and Ron had found it grating, not because he denied the accuracy, but because of the delivery, which had the quality of a correction rather than help. Harry watched this happen and thought about it. Ron's good at chess, Harry told Hermione on Thursday morning, walking to charms. He beat that fourth year at breakfast. Hermione glanced at him. What's that got to do with, he thinks spatially, strategically? Harry looked at her. He's going to be good at transfiguration once he stops thinking it's just about wand motions and starts thinking about the structure of what he wants to change. If you explained it that way to him, in terms of the spatial logic, he'd get it. Hermione was quiet for a moment. You're telling me how to tell him. I'm telling you a way that might work better, Harry said. You'd be the one deciding. She thought about this for the rest of the walk. That evening, Harry watched her explain a transfiguration concept to Ron using exactly the chess game framing, and watched Ron's face go from defensive to genuinely interested in about 30 seconds, and watched Hermione clock that it had worked and adjust something in how she was approaching it. She was watching herself, Harry realized. She'd been watching herself do the thing that didn't work and not knowing how to change it, and being shown an alternative had been all she needed. She was going to be remarkable in 2 years if she kept that up. He told her this plainly, and she looked at him and said, "That's an oddly specific prediction." "I make a lot of them," Harry said. "I'm usually right." "That's very confident." "I try to be accurate," Harry said. "Confidence just looks like what accuracy feels like from the outside." She had no response to this, which was not a common occurrence. The flying lesson arrived on a gray Thursday afternoon, and Harry walked out to the broomsticks on the lawn and stood in a line with everyone else and waited for Madame Hooch's instruction, and when she said up, his broom came to his hand before she'd finished the word. He noticed Draco Malfoy 3 places down the line doing a visible double-take. Draco Malfoy was an experience Harry had been having in increments since the first day, a boy who had the same quality of assurance Harry had, but sourced from entirely different material. Harry's ease came from knowing what he was. Draco's came from knowing what he was worth, which was a system built on other people's acknowledgement, and therefore structurally fragile in a way Harry's wasn't. Draco had tried to establish a dynamic on day one that Harry had declined to participate in the offer of alliance, the implication that certain families and bloodlines mattered, delivered with the expectation of a specific response. Harry had listened to it fully, which Draco had seemed to take his interest, and then said, "I think I'll make my own decisions about who's worth knowing," and walked away, and Draco had been trying to recalibrate ever since. Now broom in hand, Draco looked at Harry's easy grip and said, loudly enough to carry, "Natural, is it? Or have you been practicing in secret?" "I grew up with someone who swings on webs," Harry said pleasantly. Brooms seemed manageable. Several people laughed. Draco's face did something he didn't intend, and he looked away. They went up. Madame Hooch gave them a minute of free flight before the instruction began, and Harry took his broom up to about 40 feet, which was higher than most of his year, and held it there, and looked at the castle from above. It was extraordinary from here. The towers and the lake and the forest and the mountains, and the sky enormous overhead, and the ambient magic of the place even stronger at altitude somehow, like it concentrated upward. Harry sat on the broom and looked at all of it and felt something that was almost identical to what he'd felt on Peter's back that first night over Queen's, the drop and the speed and the world rearranging itself below into geometry, except this time it was his. He went faster. Not performatively, just because it was available. Speed resolved into a line, the castle into a blur, the cold air into something tactile and absolute, and Harry banked hard at the east tower and came back in a long arc and leveled off and slowed. And when he came back to the group level, Ron said, with considerable feeling, "Blimey," and Hermione said, "You should be careful at that speed." And Harry said, "I know what I'm doing," and she looked at him and said, "I know you do, that's not what I meant." And what she actually meant, Harry understood, was that she'd been watching and been concerned, which was different, and he said, "Thank you," and she looked slightly surprised and said, "Right." Neville had fallen off his broom 20 feet up and cracked his wrist, and in the chaos of Madame Hooch taking him to the hospital wing, Draco had picked up Neville's remembrall and held it over his head like a hostage, and the quality of the moment had the particular small ugliness of someone who only performed when the audience was captive. Harry flew to Draco's level without hurry. "Give it back," he said. Draco looked at him. His broom wobbled slightly. He was a competent flyer, not a natural one. "And if I don't?" Harry held out his hand. Something happened, very slight, very controlled. The remembrall pulled itself from Draco's grip with the specific purposeful motion of Harry's sideways lean, the magic that didn't need wand or motion, just wanting and intent, and landed in Harry's palm. Draco stared at his empty hand. "Thanks," Harry said, and flew back down. Draco didn't say anything. Several people exchanged looks. Harry pocketed the remembrall to return to Neville and didn't think much more about it, except to note that he'd used it openly and without particular concern, which felt correct. McGonagall appeared from the castle door 5 minutes later with the specific efficiency of someone who had been watching from a window and had something to say about it. She looked at Harry. Harry looked back. "That was an unusual demonstration, Mr. Potter," she said. "Draco had Neville's remembrall," Harry said. "I retrieved it, without touching it." "That's correct." She was quiet for a moment, and her expression was doing something it did sometimes when he pushed the edge of what she'd expected, not disapproval, something more like a person updating a document. "I see," she said. "Come with me." She took him up to meet Oliver Wood and told Oliver Harry was his new seeker, and did not mention the other thing, which Harry appreciated for its pragmatism. Would explain Quidditch at high speed with the enthusiasm of a man who had been waiting for this conversation. And Harry listened and asked 2 questions, both of which made Wood's face light up like someone who'd been understood, and when he walked out of the meeting he thought, "I want to play this game." Not because he was good at it, because it was fast. He was very good at it by November. The first match was Gryffindor versus Slytherin, and Harry caught the snitch 11 minutes in, pulling out of a dive at about 15 feet above the pitch and landing with it closed in his fist, which produced a noise from the Gryffindor stands that he felt through the soles of his trainers. He found Ron and Hermione in the crowd after, and Ron was shouting and Hermione was saying, "You were going so fast coming out of that dive, I thought, and Ron said it was brilliant. Hermione said it was brilliant, yes, but I thought. And Harry said I was fine. And Hermione said, I know you were, I know, I just. And Ron said to Harry, she screamed. She won't tell you that, but she screamed. And Hermione said, I did not scream. I raised my voice in a moment of concern. And Harry laughed, actually laughed, the full unguarded kind, and felt the rightness of this specific group of 3 people in this specific moment on this specific patch of ground. He wrote to Peter that night. The owls she had, as Harry predicted, revealed her name to him eventually, or rather he'd started calling her something and she'd stopped ignoring it, which amounted to the same thing. So her name was now Pip, took the letter with the focused efficiency she brought to everything, and was gone into the November dark before Harry had finished putting his quill down. Peter caught the snitch in 11 minutes. The flying here is extraordinary. It's like swinging, but with altitude control. I'm telling Hermione you'd find her interesting. She'd tell you your technique is probably wrong and then be right about it. Ron has started calling us the trio, which I think means it's official. Also, there's something in the 3rd floor corridor I want to look at. I'll tell you when I know more. The scar signal is coming from somewhere in the castle. It's directional and getting clearer. I'm being careful. I'm also not hiding what I am. You said both of those could coexist, and I think you were right. H. He sent it and sat back on his bed and looked at the dormitory, the other Gryffindor boys sleeping or nearly sleeping, the castle doing its old breathing thing around them, and thought about the 3rd floor door. He thought about what Hagrid had said about a break-in at Gringotts, the same day Harry and Peter had been there, a vault emptied that had already been emptied that morning. He thought about the timing. He thought about a large dog he'd heard through the locked door when he'd paused in the corridor one night after hours, 3 heads. If the sound was any indication, 3 distinct breathing patterns, enormous. He thought about the scar signal and its direction. Something was in this castle that Voldemort wanted, and something that Voldemort wanted was, by definition, worth understanding. He wasn't concerned. He was interested, which was a different thing and more useful. He lay down and looked at the ceiling, and listened to the castle settle around him, its centuries of accumulated magic as familiar now as the ambient sound of Queen's traffic, not his yet, but becoming his, the way places become yours through attention and time. He thought about Peter on a rooftop in Queens saying, whatever comes for him, it's going to have to come through me first. He smiled at the ceiling. He'd graduated some time ago, he thought, from being the thing that needed protecting. He was becoming something else, not protection exactly, but its own thing, something adjacent, something that didn't have a clean name yet. The hat had said he chose hard things because he'd rather. Yeah, Harry thought. That was about right. He closed his eyes. The castle breathed. Somewhere 3 floors up and to the right, a 3-headed dog shifted in the dark, guarding something it had been told mattered. Somewhere in the castle, a professor touched the back of his turban with nervous, concealing hands. Harry made a note in his internal file, the one he kept for things requiring future attention, and went to sleep. Chapter 5, The Stone and the Spider. The thing about the Philosopher's Stone was that by the time Harry was walking toward the 3rd floor corridor with Ron and Hermione at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night in June, he'd known about it for 3 months. Not from anyone telling him, from the same methodology that had filled 7 composition notebooks, paying attention, asking the right questions, and letting the answers arrange themselves into the shape they were already trying to be. Hagrid's slip in November about Fluffy, the 3-headed dog, Nicholas Flamel's name in one of Hermione's library books in December, which she'd found first, and which Harry had followed up through 4 additional texts to arrive at the complete picture. The only known Philosopher's Stone in existence, producing the elixir of life, moved from Gringotts to Hogwarts after an attempted robbery, hidden under the 3rd floor beneath a dog that Hagrid had purchased from a Greek chap at a pub. The series of protections beyond it, which Harry had been mapping through the year via the indirect evidence of which teachers seemed to know something was being guarded: McGonagall, Flitwick, Sprout, Snape, Quirrell. Each one had contributed something. Each one something was, therefore, approximately characterized by their subject expertise. He'd written it all out in February and shown it to Hermione, who had read it with increasing speed and then looked at him and said, "How long have you known this?" "Most of it since December," Harry said. "The complete picture since February." "Harry, we should tell someone." "Tell who?" he said, not challenging, genuinely asking. "Dumbledore already knows it's there." He set up the protections. Snape knows. McGonagall knows. If there was an immediate threat, they'd know before us. He paused. "The threat I'm watching isn't the stone, it's who wants it and why." Hermione had looked at him. "Voldemort," she said, without flinching, which she'd stopped doing around November after Harry had calmly used the name enough times that avoiding it had started to feel like the more effortful choice. "Something connected to Voldemort," Harry said. "Something in the castle." He touched his forehead briefly, the way he sometimes gestured at the scar signal. "It's been getting stronger since April, more directed. Like it's been doing something." Ron, who had been listening with his legs over the arm of the common room chair, said, "Is it dangerous to you? The signal thing?" "No," Harry said. "It's information." I'm treating it like information. Right, Ron said. So what are we doing? Harry had looked at both of them. Watching, he said, until watching stops being enough. It stopped being enough on the last Tuesday of the school year when 3 things happened in sequence. The first was Neville. He came to find Harry in the common room after dinner, his face carrying the specific expression of someone who has made a decision that's cost them something. Neville had been growing steadily since September, not in confidence exactly, more like in solidity, like a building finding its foundations, and he stood in front of Harry's chair and said, "I know you're planning to go after the stone tonight. I heard you and Hermione talking earlier. Part of it," Harry said. "I think you should be careful," Neville said. "Not because I know you can handle it, He stopped and started again. "I wanted you to know that I know, and I'm not going to pretend I don't, and if you need anything," he stopped again. Harry looked at him. "Thank you, Neville," he said, and he meant it with the full weight he put behind things he meant. Neville nodded, looking slightly surprised to have managed the conversation, and went to sit with his copy of herbology. The second thing was the letter from Hagrid. Brought by Pip at 7 in the evening, short and distressed. Someone had asked him questions about Fluffy, specifically about what would get the dog to sleep, and he'd told them a piece of music, just play it any music, and he'd only realized afterward what he'd given away and to whom, and he was so sorry, he didn't know what had gotten into him. Harry read it twice, then he wrote 2 things, a note to Dumbledore, short and specific. "I believe there will be an attempt on the stone tonight. I intend to go through the traps. I'm not asking permission. I'm informing you so you can return quickly if you've been drawn away." He sent it with the school owls. Then he wrote to Peter, 3 lines, "It's tonight. I know what I'm doing. I'll write tomorrow." He sent that with Pip. The third thing was Quirrell, who had simply vanished from dinner service, and whose absence from the table had a specific quality, not absence through lateness or illness, but the absent quality of a stage after the last act has left it. Harry stood up from the table and said quietly to Ron and Hermione, "Now." They went at 11, giving the castle time to settle into its night rhythms. Harry had his wand. He had something else too, the full, aligned coherence of 2 fused things that had been building since he was 8, and were now, at 11, operating with the precise ease of something completely settled into itself. He could feel it the way you feel balanced, not as effort, but as the absence of effort. He hadn't told Ron and Hermione the full scope of it, not because he was hiding it, he didn't hide things, but because in the ordinary run of school days, it hadn't come up in ways that required the complete picture, and Harry had a practical objection to explaining himself in advance of situations that would demonstrate the point more clearly. The 3rd floor corridor was quiet, and the locked door was locked, and Harry put his hand on it, and it wasn't locked anymore, and they went in. Fluffy was there. 3 enormous heads, 3 sets of jaws, each one the size of a small car, and between the front paws a trapdoor that was already open, which meant Quirrell was ahead of them. On the floor near the back wall, a small harp was playing by itself, keeping one of the 3 heads drowsy, the other 2 fighting toward wakefulness. The music was already slowing, the spell running down. Hermione said, "We need music to keep it." Harry crouched beside the harp. He looked at it for a moment, the way he looked at mechanisms he was learning. Then he put 2 fingers on the strings and the music continued, not the same notes, something different, simpler, but with something behind it that wasn't in the original enchantment. The harp's self-playing stopped and Harry's didn't, and all 3 of Fluffy's heads went down slowly, and the breathing deepened into the slow thunder of deep sleep. Ron stared. "You're playing a magic harp with 2 fingers. "Magic's not in the harp," Harry said, standing up. "It's in what you want the sound to do." He looked at the trapdoor. "Come on." They dropped through. The devil's snare was next. Hermione identified it in about 4 seconds, and Harry went through it like it was a suggestion rather than a trap, the tendrils finding nothing to grip, pulling back from whatever they encountered when they touched him. Ron needed Hermione to manage his panic and then her light spell to clear it, and then they were through and in the corridor leading to the next chamber. The keys were beautiful and completely mental, hundreds of winged keys in a stone room with 3 broomsticks, 1 correct key to the next door, all the keys moving. Ron and Hermione took brooms. Harry stood in the middle of the room and looked at the cloud of keys for a moment and then raised one hand, palm up. The keys stopped moving, all of them. Every single one hanging in the air in perfect stillness, the wing beats ceasing, the whole flock suspended. In the silence, they could hear their own breathing. Harry walked through the frozen keys to the door, tried 3 large, old-fashioned, bright blue, slightly bent feather, got it on the 3rd, and unlocked it. The keys began moving again when they went through. Ron said, "Right, okay, just right." Hermione said nothing, but she was looking at Harry with the expression she wore when she was updating a significant volume of material. The giant chess set. Harry looked at it with the same initial assessment he gave all problems. Ron was already moving forward, had already understood what was required, was already stepping into the role like someone recognizing the shape of their own skill. He was good at this, not just the game of it, but the reading of it, the spatial thinking Harry had told Hermione about in October. "Ron," Harry said. Ron turned. I'll play too, Harry said. But you call it. You see this better than I do. Ron blinked. Then something happened in his expression, the specific thing that happens when someone is trusted in their exact right area by someone they respect, and he stood straighter and he said, "Right. Your bishop, Hermione's castle, I'll take the knight." He started walking, already seeing it. "Give me a minute to read the board." Harry took the bishop's square and stood in the opening position and waited. The pieces moved at Ron's direction. He saw it in Ron's face, the progression of it, the 3-move plan becoming the 5-move plan, the moment the full solution opened up, what it cost. Ron's knight moved into check range deliberately, and Ron sat on the horse and looked at Harry with a face that had already made its peace with the sacrifice. "I knew," Ron said simply. "I know," Harry said. "Go," Ron said. "Both of you, go." Harry and Hermione went through the door and Harry could hear, behind them, the crash of marble and the sound of Ron's knight going down. They ran. The troll in the next room was unconscious, which meant Quirrell had already handled it. Harry filed this as useful tactical information. Quirrell was ahead of them, but they were catching up. They passed the troll and the poison's room was Snape's, which Harry had been thinking about since February, and when they got there Hermione solved it in 4 minutes with the logical precision that was her very best feature, and Harry let her, because she needed it and it was hers, and when she solved it, her face had the clean satisfaction of someone doing the thing they were made to do. "There's only enough for one of us to go through the black flame," Hermione said, looking at the bottles, "and enough for one of us to go back." She looked at Harry. "You go forward." "I'll go back for Ron." Harry looked at her. "Harry," she said, and her voice was steady and direct, "you're the one who can handle whatever's in there, I know that. I'm not being self-sacrificing, I'm being accurate." He held her gaze for a moment. He thought about a girl on a train who'd said "I'm Hermione Granger" twice with different meanings, and about chess framings for transfiguration, and about her voice going sharp when he'd pulled out of that Quidditch dive, and about the word accurate, which she'd learned to use from him the way he'd learned about logical structure from her. "Go back for Ron," he said. "Make sure he's okay. Write to Peter, Pip is with my things, she knows his address, just tell her." He picked up the small bottle. "And Hermione, you figured out the puzzle." "Yes," she said. "In 4 minutes," Harry said. "That was exceptional." She looked at him, and her face did the thing it sometimes did when she was given something she hadn't expected, a brief unguarded moment before the composure came back. "Go stop Voldemort," she said, and turned back to the purple flame. Harry drank the potion and walked through the black fire. The final chamber was simple. Stone room, large, lit by torches that burned with the cold light of things that had been burning a long time. In the center, the mirror of Arist, still and dark-faced and enormous, and standing in front of it, Quirrell. He had his back to Harry. He was staring into the mirror with the concentrated desperation of someone who had been trying to get something from it and hadn't managed it yet. His hands were raised slightly, the body language of someone reaching. Harry walked into the chamber. He wasn't quiet about it. He let his footsteps sound on the stone. Quirrell turned. He dropped the stutter and the nervous energy and all of it, and what was left underneath was a face that was thin and drawn, and had the particular quality of someone who has been wanting something for a very long time and is very close to it. The eyes were his own, but there was something behind them, not possession exactly, not full control, but presence, a weight, a specific intelligence that was older and colder and more deliberate than Quirrell. "Harry Potter," Quirrell said, and his voice was flat and clear. "Professor," Harry said. "You worked it out," Quirrell said. There was something in his voice that was almost respect, in the way that precision instruments respect other precision instruments. "How long?" "That it was you, February," Harry said. "That you were hosting him, the turban, December. The signal's been clear since I got here." Quirrell's expression moved. "The scar," he said. "Of course," he studied Harry. "You don't look afraid." "I'm not," Harry said. "You should be," Quirrell said. "What's behind me in that mirror, what my master needs, you can't prevent it." "You're 11 years old. The mirror won't give it to you," Harry said. He'd thought about the mirror of Arist in December, when he'd found it by accident in an unused classroom and stood in front of it and looked at what it showed and walked away. He'd thought about Dumbledore's explanation. It shows what you want most, gives it to those who want it for its own sake. He'd thought about what Flamel's protection on the stone actually required. It gives the stone to someone who wants to find it but not use it. You want to use it. Your master wants to use it. The mirror isn't going to give you anything. Quirrell's jaw tightened. "And we have a problem." "Yes," Harry agreed. "You do. Turn around," Quirrell said. "Look in the mirror. Tell me what you see." Harry looked at him for a moment. He thought about Ron under a marble piece on a chessboard, and Hermione with her 4-minute logical solution, and Neville standing in the common room having made a decision. He thought about what was behind Quirrell's eyes, and what it had done to his parents, and what it had done to a woman named Lily Evans, who had made a specific choice that had produced a specific magic that was still, 10 years later, reverberating. He turned and looked in the mirror. It showed him himself, no different. Just Harry, the scar and the glasses and the green eyes, but with both hands open at his sides, and in the right hand, something small and red glinting. He felt it happen, the stone responding to the exact mechanism Dumbledore had built, the desire to find it and not use it. He felt the weight of it in his pocket before he'd logically registered that his pocket was heavier. He turned around. "I can see something," he said, "but it's not the stone." Quirrell moved toward him. "You're lying, I can see it in your face. What did it show you? Tell me now." "He's lying," said a voice that was not Quirrell's. It came from Quirrell's direction, but not from Quirrell's mouth. From behind him, from behind his head. Low and thin and cold, and carrying the specific quality of something that had been very powerful and had been reduced, and was very unhappy about both of those facts. "Let me speak to him," the voice said. Quirrell stopped. He reached up and began unwinding the turban with the slow, reluctant motion of someone doing something they have run out of reasons not to do. Harry watched. He didn't step back, he didn't adjust his stance. He stood where he was and watched Quirrell unwrap the turban and turn around, and there was a face on the back of his head, chalk white, barely there, the face of something that had been reduced to the absolute minimum of what it needed to persist, red eyes and a flat, noseless face, and a will behind it that was enormous and ancient and completely, absolutely convinced of its own primacy. "Harry Potter," Voldemort said. Harry looked at him. "Give me the stone," Voldemort said, and his voice had the quality of something that had commanded armies. "Give it to me and I will let you live. I will do more, I will give you what the mirror showed you, the thing you want most. I can give you your parents, Harry. I can bring them back." "No, you can't," Harry said. "Oh, but you can't," Harry said. "That's not how any of it works and you know it. The elixir of life doesn't resurrect people, you know that. You're not offering me anything real." He paused. "You're trying to find an angle and there isn't one." Voldemort was quiet for a moment. The red eyes were doing something, recalibrating. The same process Harry recognized from Snape in October, from Ollivander in August, the rapid revision of expectations meeting actuality. "You're not afraid of me," Voldemort said. "No," Harry said. "You should understand what I am," Voldemort said. "What I was, what I will be again." "I understand exactly what you are," Harry said. "You're a very powerful wizard who made a series of decisions based on the premise that power was the thing that mattered most. And you've spent the last 10 years as a ghost on the back of someone else's head because it turns out that premise has a flaw." He looked at Voldemort's barely there face. "I don't think you're nothing. I think you're genuinely dangerous and I'm taking this seriously. I'm just not scared of you." Voldemort made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "The boy wonder," he said. "The child who lived, you think surviving once makes you. I'm not here because I survived," Harry said. "I'm here because someone I love was in the room." He was thinking about Peter on a rooftop saying not stopping something when you can stop it is its own kind of choice. He was thinking about May at a kitchen table handing someone a second bowl of pasta. He was thinking about Ron on a chess horse saying I knew. He was thinking about what his mother had done, the choice that had made the magic, that had made the scar, that had made the signal that had led him here. "Quirrell," Voldemort said, and the single word was a command. Quirrell lunged. Harry moved, not away, toward. He stepped inside Quirrell's reach before the man had finished the motion, and he put both hands on Quirrell's face. He didn't plan it, he didn't think it through. He reached for what was available, the full, fused, coherent thing that lived in him, the thing that was magic and reflex and speed and intent, and 5 years of Saturday mornings and 7 composition notebooks, and a hospital room at midnight and 2 fused impossibilities that were now one single thing that was entirely his, and he put it through his hands and into Quirrell. Not violence, not attack exactly. Something more like opposition, like pressing a countercurrent against a current, like showing something the full picture of what it was pressing against. Quirrell screamed, not pain or not only pain. More like the sound of something that had been holding two things apart that had now been put in contact with something they had no framework for. Where Harry's hands touched his skin it was burning, and not with heat, with Harry didn't have a word for what it was with. Not then, not until much later. Not heat, contact. The specific contact of something that was completely saturated with the life and will of someone who was loved, who had been saved, who had grown up chosen and protected and fed and taken to libraries and trained on Saturday mornings and trusted completely. Something like Lily's choice but wearing different clothes. Quirrell fell. Fell fast and completely, the way things fall when something fundamental has given way, and Harry stepped back and Quirrell was on the stone floor and the scar was blazing, not the gentle directional signal of the past year but the full acute alarm of something at its limit. And Voldemort's voice said something that was less a word than a sound, something raw and stripped, and then the face on the back of Quirrell's head was doing something Harry had no category for. It came apart, not explosively. Like mist going when the sun comes through, dissolving, thinning the red eyes last of all, the last light of them angry and calculating and absolutely furious and then gone. And the thing that had been Voldemort was a cloud of darkness briefly, occupying the room, and it passed through Harry because it didn't have a choice about the direction it had to go, and Harry felt it go through him. Cold and enormous and very ancient and completely unable to get any purchase on him because there was nothing in him it could hold on to. No fear, no despair. No void that needed filling, nothing it could use. It was gone in 3 seconds. Quirrell was unconscious. His hands were blistered where Harry had touched them, Harry stood in the chamber with the stone in his pocket and the mirror behind him and the torches burning cold, and he took a moment to assess arms, legs, head, body inventory. He was fine. The scar had stopped blazing and was at a low, fading throb, like the echo of something that had just been very loud. He crouched beside Quirrell and checked for breathing. Present. Irregular, but present. He would need medical attention. Harry straightened up. He put his hand in his pocket and felt the stone small, smooth, warm, and held it for a moment. He thought about Nicholas Flamel, who was very old and had been expecting to live forever, and was now probably going to need to have a conversation about that. He thought about Dumbledore, who had built these protections and had apparently counted on them being sufficient. He put the stone back in his pocket and walked back toward the black flame. He got 3 steps and the world went sideways. Not pain, the absence of strength, sudden and complete, the way a light goes when the switch is thrown rather than when the bulb burns out. He hit one knee on the stone floor and caught himself on both hands and stayed there for a moment, breathing. That had taken something. He hadn't felt it taking it while it was happening. That was how this worked, the cost arriving in arrears, but it had taken a significant amount of whatever the fused thing ran on, and his body was filing an urgent report about this fact. He got back up. He had to push to do it, his arms working harder than they should, the specific fatigue of something depleted. He walked back through the black flame and the purple flame in the chess room. Ron was gone, Hermione had gotten there, and by the time he was through the trapdoor and past Fluffy, and in the 3rd floor corridor, he was leaning one hand on the wall. He was not going to stop. He made it to the staircase and sat down on the steps because standing was currently a project requiring more resources than he had, and he sat there with his back to the wall, and his legs out in front of him and the stone in his pocket, and thought about the drafts of living death and the structure of potions that used both toxin and antidote in the same formula. He thought about Ron saying "I knew" with complete peace. He thought about Hermione's face when she'd solved the puzzle in 4 minutes. He was going to write a very detailed entry about this in the composition notebook, several entries. The cost structure of large expenditures, the specific phenomenology of Voldemort passing through him, the mirror's mechanism and how it had worked exactly as intended, the thermal nature of whatever his hands had done to Quirrell, which he still needed to theorize more carefully. He was thinking about entry structure when Dumbledore found him. He came around the corner at the foot of the stairs with the specific speed of someone who had received a letter and come back from London quickly and then run, which was not a sight Harry had associated with Dumbledore. He stopped at the foot of the stairs when he saw Harry and looked at him, sitting against the wall, clearly depleted, the stone presumably in his pocket, and his expression had several things in it. Relief. Complicated kind of awe, something older than both, something that had the texture of being wrong about something important and knowing it. "Harry," he said. "Professor," Harry said. Dumbledore came up the stairs and sat down across from him, which was not what Harry had expected, and looked at him carefully. "Are you hurt?" "Depleted," Harry said. "Not hurt." "Quirrell needs medical attention. He's in the final chamber. I didn't kill him. He might need it quickly." Dumbledore produced his wand and did something brief and complex that Harry filed as a summoning charm of some kind, but with a longer range than he'd seen used before. Then he looked at Harry again. "Voldemort is gone," he said, "not a question. For now," Harry said. "Not permanently. I didn't have the mechanism for permanent." He paused. "I don't think anyone does yet." Dumbledore was quiet. His eyes, which were very blue and very sharp behind the half-moon glasses, were doing the same thing Ollivander's had done, the same thing Snape's had done, the same thing several people's had done this year, the rapid, significant revision. "May I ask," he said carefully, "what you used? What I felt from the protections before I arrived, it was familiar but not. It was like magic but with 2 sources," Harry said, "fused when I was 8. He looked at Dumbledore steadily. "I've been practicing since I was 6. May Parker told me what I was. Peter Parker trained me." Dumbledore looked at him. "The man who found you," he said. "The man who found me in the cupboard you put me in," Harry said. Not with anger, not as an attack, as accuracy. He said it the way he'd said everything accurate this year. Directly, without performance, the flat factual statement of something that was true, and he saw no reason to dress differently. Dumbledore's expression was the most undefended Harry had seen it. "I placed you there because of the blood protection Lily left," he said. I know what you believed," Harry said. "May explain the theory, the blood magic, the protection through Petunia, the logic of it." He met Dumbledore's gaze without blinking. "The logic was sound, and the execution was wrong because you didn't check what was happening in the house. Those are both true at the same time. I don't need an apology. I need you to understand that I'm not who you planned for." Dumbledore held his gaze. He held it for a long time, this old man with his half-moon glasses and his complicated history, and then he said something that Harry had not expected. "No," he said quietly, you're considerably more." He paused. "And I find that I am glad of it." Harry looked at him. "I have spent many years," Dumbledore said, and his voice had the quality of someone choosing honesty over narrative, planning for a boy who needed to be shaped and guided and protected. I designed those protections, he gestured vaguely at the third-floor corridor above them, with a specific future in mind, a future in which Harry Potter survived because of what I built around him. He looked at Harry's face. You went through those protections in how long? 40 minutes, Harry said. Roughly, 40 minutes, Dumbledore said, including a confrontation with Voldemort himself. He was quiet for a moment. You also wrote me a letter. To tell you where I was going, Harry said, so you could come back. I wasn't being heroic. It was tactical. I wanted you available if I miscalculated, and if you hadn't miscalculated. Then I wouldn't need you, Harry said, and you'd come back to find it finished. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. Then very quietly he said, your mother would have liked you enormously. Harry sat with that. He let it land in the full weight of it, the real weight, the specific weight of someone who'd kept a photograph in a shoebox and a letter worn soft at the folds, and had never fully known what it was he was missing until he'd been given enough safety to understand what missing felt like. Tell me about her, Harry said, not what she did, who she was. And Dumbledore, sitting on a stone staircase in a castle at midnight with a depleted 11-year-old who had just done something that revised his entire understanding of what was coming, did. He talked for 20 minutes. Harry listened the way he always listened, completely, without hurrying it. Lily Evans, who'd been brilliant and warm and fierce, and had argued with Dumbledore twice in his own office about things she was right about, and Dumbledore had told her so. Lily Evans, who had loved fiercely and chosen deliberately, and whose last act had been the most powerful magic Dumbledore had encountered in 70 years of encountering magic. When he stopped, Harry was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and put the Philosopher's Stone on the step between them. Nicholas Flamel needs to know, Harry said. Whatever's going to happen to the stone, whatever you decide, I think he should be in that conversation. Dumbledore looked at the stone, then at Harry. Yes, he said, he should, and I want to be in the conversation about what comes next year, Harry said, and the year after. Not as someone you're protecting, as someone you're working with. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment, then he nodded. That seems, he said carefully, like the appropriate arrangement. Harry nodded and stood up. His legs were steadier than they'd been 20 minutes ago. The depletion was already beginning to ease, not quickly but noticeably, the recovery rate of something that had been given the right fuel for most of its life. He looked down at Dumbledore, still sitting on the step, looking up at him with those very blue eyes. The protections were excellent, Harry said. Flitwick's key puzzle was genuinely interesting. McGonagall's chess set was the hardest one. Dumbledore blinked. I'll pass that on, he said. Harry almost smiled and walked up the stairs toward the hospital wing. He was asleep before Hermione arrived, which she later said she'd found deeply annoying, that he'd done the whole thing and was already resting while she was still frantic. And Harry had said, I was depleted, I needed sleep. And she'd said, I know, we were worried. And Ron had said she definitely screamed again. And Hermione had said, I raised my voice in a context of significant concern. And Harry had laughed, lying in a hospital bed with 3 days left in his first year. And felt the specific rightness of this exact moment, and these exact people, and this exact place. Madame Pomfrey had assessed him with the focused efficiency of someone who'd been working at Hogwarts long enough that unusual ceased to apply, and had told him he needed 2 days of rest and significant caloric intake, both of which Harry was entirely willing to comply with. He sent a letter to Peter from the hospital bed. Pip took it with the brisk professionalism of an owl who had been expecting to deliver something and had been waiting with pointed patience for Harry to get on with it. Peter, it's done. Stone is safe. Voldemort is gone for now, not permanently. I'm in the hospital wing, depleted but fine. Pomfrey says 2 days and I'll be ready. Quirrell is I don't know. I used my hands. I need to talk you through what happened because I don't fully have the theory yet. Dumbledore is good. Complicated but good. We had a conversation. I think we'll have more. He told me about my mum. You'd have liked her. She argued with Dumbledore twice in his own office and he told her she was right. I know what you're going to say, and yes, I'm eating, and yes, I'm resting. Pomfrey is very thorough. Tell May I'm fine. Tell her the castle's good. She was right. These are my people. She sent the letter and lay back on the hospital pillow and looked at the ceiling of the hospital wing, stone, ancient, the torches in their brackets casting the familiar moving light, and felt the fused thing in him doing its recovery work, steady and unhurried, rebuilding from its own reserves. The scar was quiet. The station it had been tuned to had gone off the air. For now, and the absence of that signal was a different kind of thing than silence, fuller, like the specific fullness of a room after an argument has left it. Not peace exactly, more like space. Room for what was coming. He thought about Voldemort's voice saying, give me the stone, with the absolute conviction of something that had never seriously encountered refusal, and thought about what that conviction must feel like from the inside, and thought about what it would mean to fight it properly rather than surviving it incidentally. He thought about what Dumbledore had said, you're considerably more. He thought about the composition notebooks, the basement on Saturday mornings, Peter throwing tennis balls at him in a training context. May in the kitchen with her back turned, Hermione's 4-minute solution, Ron on the chess horse saying I knew, the tawny owl who'd bitten his finger and become Pip, all of it. All of it had come here and done what it was, and there was so much more of it still to come. He closed his eyes. He was 11 years old and had walked through 6 magical traps and faced down Voldemort and sent the man screaming into dispersal with his bare hands. The noteworthy part, he thought, sliding toward sleep, was not that he'd managed it. The noteworthy part was that it had felt, the whole time, like exactly what he was for.